actually good.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corby Kummer. Federal immigration enforcement officials have admitted a man legally in the U.S. was deported to El Salvador. NPR's Rümeysa Öztürk reports the immigration officials admit this was a mistake.
Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, a man from El Salvador, had first been detained by immigration officials in 2019. When going through immigration court, a judge granted him the right to not be deported back to his home country. Still, last month, Abrego Garcia was one of several men accused of being gang members and deported to a mega prison in El Salvador. Immigration advocates have sued the government, arguing that people didn't get due process or the ability to contest the claims that they were gang members before they were sent to El Salvador. The government acknowledges it made a mistake in Abrego Garcia's case, but government lawyers say there's nothing they can do now that he's in the custody of another government. Rümeysa Öztürk, NPR News, Washington.
New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker has denounced the Trump administration's admitted error in the deportation of Abrego Garcia. Booker is continuing to hold the floor of the U.S. Senate. He's been speaking for the last 16 hours straight. This is not a filibuster. Booker, with the help of other Senate Democrats, is speaking continuously, he says, to denounce actions of the Trump administration. He says these hurt the country. President Trump is poised to announce what he calls reciprocal tariffs on goods from other nations tomorrow. What those tariffs are remain a mystery. Trump says the tariffs will help create jobs. NPR's Scott Horsley reports economists say many will feel increased costs.
Tariffs are taxes. They generally push up prices. They're a potential drag on spending, and they invite retaliation against U.S. exports. On top of that, you've got the unpredictable way the Trump administration has rolled out his tariff agenda, on one day, off the next, back on again. All that just adds the uncertainty and makes it very hard for businesses to plan.
NPR's Scott Horsley reporting. The Trump administration has started laying off thousands of workers at the nation's health agencies. NPR's Rob Stein reports employees at the National Institutes of Health are learning who's being let go or reassigned.
Hundreds of workers at the NIH began receiving notices that they were among about 1,200 people being cut at the agency. Many of the NIH cuts appear to involve communications, IT, and other support staff, but at least several high-ranking NIH officials also appear to be out. For example, Dr. Jeannie Marazzo, who took over the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases after Dr. Anthony Fauci departed, is being offered reassignment to the Indian Health Service elsewhere in the country. Rob Stein, NPR News.
On Wall Street, stocks are mixed. The Dow Jones Industrials are down 40 points. The Nasdaq is up about 90. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Not long after President Donald Trump said on Sunday that he's not joking about potentially running for a third term, a bunch of Massachusetts Democrats weighed right in. Congressman Stephen Lynch said in a statement to Master List that Congress and the federal cuts in the federal courts in the Constitution and the 22nd Amendment mean nothing to Donald Trump. Also weighing in was Congressman Jake Auchincloss, who pointed to the silence on the matter from the congressional Republicans. Auchincloss told reporters that even when the President of the United States says something so blatantly illegal, they will still refuse to stand up to him. And shortly after that 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit Myanmar this past Friday, Harvard students from Myanmar, in collaboration with around 30 other universities, raised more than $60,000 as of yesterday through a GoFundMe campaign. To date, that earthquake left more than 2,000 dead, with thousands more injured. Thousands of homes were destroyed, and hospitals around the country reported to be increasingly overwhelmed. Sammy Tin, an international student from Myanmar, has led the efforts at Harvard to raise awareness about the devastation. Tin originally established the fundraiser on her own after a phone call with her family, some of whom live near the epicenter of that quake. She quickly got support from other student associations at other schools, and as of yesterday morning, the GoFundMe page had donations from Cornell, Tufts, the University of Michigan, Northeastern, and Boston University. 45 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from the Skoll Foundation, dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org. And Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. And thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back here again tomorrow and Friday and next Tuesday at the Boston Public Library. We're going to be joined by the Auditor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That would be Diana DiZoglio.
Did you say Mayor Wu?
No, I didn't.
Oh, how about that?
Oh, wait a minute. She's coming Wednesday. Diana DiZoglio is coming Wednesday, and the mayor's coming Tuesday.
No, that's not true. Mayor's coming Tuesday.
Mayor's coming Tuesday. That's right. That's Michelle Wu, of course. She'll be here. Whoops, got the days mixed up.
It's a hell of a
off
start.
to a good start. That's right. Well, it's April Fool's Day, you know.
And actually, I think it's going to be quite interesting. You know who's joining us on Thursday?
Who's going to be joining us
Tom
on Thursday?
O'Brien.
Oh.
Who was about to announce
Yeah.
for mayor, chose not to, and he's going to talk to us about that. And by the way, it's significant that Tom, who is not running, will be joining us on air before Josh Kraft, who is running, joins us on air.
Yeah.
In any case, we've heard the complaints from listeners like, I don't know, Sam in Fairhaven, Adam in New Hampshire, a whole bunch of you who say we talk about Trump too much. He's everywhere. I mean, let's face it, a lot of people, Marjorie, suffer from Trump derangement syndrome. The only cure is elections, and they're way away. So today, instead, as a favor to those people, we're going to talk about the co-president, Elon Musk. You feel better? I do. In addition to his quest to make the government a self-fulfilling prophecy of inefficiency, he also has big thoughts about Western values. Here he is.
The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. The empathy exploit. They're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response. So, and I think empathy is good, but you need to think it through and not just be programmed like a robot.
The fundamental weakness in Western civilization, he says, is empathy. That's Musk in conversation with who else? Joe Rogan at the end of February. And it appears he's tapping into a strange development in some aspects of modern American Christianity. Conservative Christians seem to be more focused on consolidating power for thyself than for thy neighbors. And they say it. We'll play some sound from them in a minute. So the text and phone lines are open at 877-301-8970. Does anyone have empathy anymore? Do you? And why did it go out of fashion with so many people in 2025? The number is 877-301-8970. If you think I'm kidding, here's a clip from the podcast of a few high-profile Christian conservatives saying empathy is a weakness.
It's yesterday's news, Jim.
You'll hear clips from podcasts Stronger Men Nation. Stronger Men Nation is one of them, hosted by Josh McPherson. Family Talk, hosted by Dr. James Dobson. And Thinking in Public, hosted by Albert Mohler, I guess. Yeah, here they are.
Empathy almost needs to be struck from the Christian vocabulary.
It does.
Empathy is dangerous. Empathy is toxic. Empathy will align you with hell.
Empathy, as hoisted up as the highest virtue, or even a virtue at all, I think that really gets us into a really big mess.
Most people have a hard time imagining how empathy could ever be harmful. And therefore, if I'm the devil, where am I going to hide some of my most destructive tactics?
What I was not aware of till this morning, and you probably were, one of the first organized groups of people who complimented the child separation policies of the first Trump administration were Christian conservatives who were saying this was not a tolerable thing, but a good thing. So we want to talk to you about empathy in 2025. And we know that Donald Trump doesn't know what it is. Apparently, Elon Musk thinks it's the root of all evil. And we want to know how you feel, essentially, about your fellow human being, regardless of who they are.
Well, when I'm thinking of Elon Musk and empathy, remember the pictures of him outside the White House when they had the Tesla showroom for the day, selling the Tesla cars there. One of them went to Donald Trump. He's got his 4-year-old kid with him. And the poor little 4-year-old,
walking around.
is like, keeps trying to catch up with his father. Because usually in those situations, you might take the kid's hand, maybe. But the kid keeps is like 20 feet behind Musk, 30 feet behind Musk. Musk wouldn't know if he disappeared. weird. Maybe because he's got so many children he can't keep track. But I thought that was an odd way for a father. So he probably lacks empathy for his own kids. He certainly lacks empathy for his trans daughter, whose life he's made miserable. But this is just a big scam.
What does that mean?
Just
What do you
like
mean?
I think. There are many people that are sincerely opposed to abortion, but then there are people like some of these Christian nationalists. It's got nothing to do with empathy for the unborn. It has to do with the political wedge. And now they've got a problem with the border, right? Because when you see pictures of people, that's not to say you have to have an open border or that there can't be some regulations and it can't be run. But the normal reaction when you see, a father and a mother and little children almost dying of thirst and getting through the jungle and going through these wire rolls that Abbott sets up in Texas, your normal reaction is these poor people, right? That's a normal human reaction. But they've got a problem now because they're trying to be Christian nationalists, really tough on the border, so they've got to say that empathy is overused.
Yeah,
it's another
that.
scam.
I don't understand that. I understand, and we did a poll, we talked about a poll the other day where 65% of the people support what Trump is doing on mass deportation. Why can't you believe that there should be mass deportation, whatever that means, without believing that you've got to exhibit intense cruelty towards other human beings? I mean, for example, the brilliance of Trump, and when I say that, I don't mean it facetiously, is all the gang members. Of course, we learned yesterday and before, a lot of them were not gang members.
Correct.
The Venezuelan
Right.
alleged gang members deported to El Salvador, to arguably the worst prison in the world. I understand you have a lot of empathy for those people. Okay. How about normal people that when you read the stories every single morning when you wake up? What was the CNN story yesterday? A couple have been here 35 years, husband and wife
Deported to Colombia.
Okay, you say to yourself, I think it's great that Trump's deporting these people. They're here illegally. But at the same time, they're your fellow human being. Their kid goes to school with your, I don't really understand. Is this just trickle-down Trumpism? Because he has never had an empathetic bone in his body?
It's a way to justify cruelty in government. I mean, look at this. For years, all the religious groups, whether it was the Lutherans or the Catholics or Jewish groups, whoever it was, were supporting all this USAID stuff. Now you got a guy that said, screw the kids who are going to starve, screw the kids who are not going to get their vaccines, screw the people who are going to die from AIDS. So you have to kind of say, because your normal reaction to a starving child is empathy, right? But they're saying there's too much of this, and it's women. The problem here, this is another one of their themes, because, these Christian nationalists don't think women should be in charge of anything, and they think women are too empathetic, and that's a problem, so we have to wipe that out. It is a way to justify the cruel policies. I mean, look at, we were just talking about that horrible prison down in El Salvador, where some people who may have been gang members and some people who may not be gang members and some people
are not.
Who shouldn't even have been deported in the first place are staying. Christy Nome, she's the one that, from Homeland Security, she's the one, of course, who shot her puppy, which most people would say is not a very empathetic thing to do. She shows up at that prison. Did you see her with the $50,000 Rolex gold watch around her? There's someone who probably is lacking in some empathy, but it's kind of the way, the religious groups for years, my point was, supported all this USAID, right? They were the ones that carried it out. But now that Trump has slashed it all and said, screw the starving children, then they have to switch sides. I mean, it's just baloney is what it is. It's just a big cover-up, just like in many cases, the abortion thing was a big cover-up. There were people who were not genuinely concerned about the unborn because they weren't concerned about the born, as we know, because the programs that would have helped the born, Republicans and a lot of these Christian nationalists voted against.
Well, to use the old line, life begins at conception, ends at birth. Here are a couple of anonymous texters before we get to your calls. Anonymous, I have no empathy for federal workers who voted for Trump and lost their jobs. Lisa and Haverhill, no empathy? Wow. Talk about taking the Christ out of Christianity. Remember their outrage over the war and Christmas?
The war.
Ugh, she says.
Yeah, that was Bill O'Reilly's big thing. The war on Christmas. You know what's amazing? Christmas is still here, Jim.
It is.
All these years after the war on Christmas, we're supposed to shut it down.
We won the war. We Jews won the war on Christmas.
That's right.
Betty in Boston, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Thanks for your patience. Hi there.
Good morning. How are you?
We're good. Thank you for calling.
So I have two comments. One is, Christians are fond of saying, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
Well, I think Jesus would kick them in the butt and send them south, very far south.
Yeah.
And then the second comment.
Wait a minute. Who would he be sticking in the butt, kicking in the butt, and sending south? Whom? Who are you talking about?
The hypocrites.
Oh, okay.
Frauds. Okay.
All right.
Second
Gotcha.
point.
The second point is that the people building our homes, we have a housing shortage, are immigrants. The people picking our food are immigrants. So unintended consequences, what's going to happen when we get rid of these people?
We'll blame Joe Biden is what we'll do when we get rid of these people, Betty. It's an easy question. Thank you very much for the call. You know, I don't mean to be moronically simple, but isn't the natural human reaction of almost everybody you met pre-Trump that to varying, I understand selfishness. I mean, I do understand the first person you think about is you, the people you love, your family, etc. I don't think I knew many people who didn't show any concern for the plight of others until 2016. Did you?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion.
We know. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a whole
one
other
of the texters says she has a ton of empathy, Marjorie Taylor Greene there.
No, but I'm serious. Is this totally a function of the age of Trump, or did I miss something, some tipping point that came pre-Trump?
Well, you know, a lot of people have said that Trump enabled people who thought were racist to come out of the closet, and maybe this is enabling people to come out of the closet about empathy, too. I mean, it's ridiculous to say. I mean, anybody who's spent any time in Sunday school knows that the Christianity is all about empathy. Love thy neighbor as thyself. The poor and the meek shall inherit the earth. All that stuff.
But
it's all about that.
Can I repeat myself before we take another call? The federal worker thing, someone just texted about it a minute ago. You can also believe the federal workforce is too big and needs to be cut down and still feel bad for somebody who loses their job. Like the two federal workers we had on the show, several weeks ago, who found out, that one guy found out an hour after he got a great evaluation that he, quote, was performing poorly. So he was fired. I mean, those aren't inconsistent.
That's what I said. You can think that we have a real problem, as we have had for many years now at the border, is out of control at the border. People are coming in, who knows where they're going, and still feel bad.
Exactly what I'm trying to say.
For people
so why
that
don't
are
they?
so. I don't think Donald Trump is a very empathetic person, and maybe everybody's trying to imitate him and his lack of empathy.
Well, how about the 65% of people saying the deportation thing is great? I would assume a lot of them don't.
I'm blowing my two more things, but let me just point out that one of these guys that's in this horrible prison down in El Salvador, that they put there by mistake, they goofed.
And Trump admits they did it by mistake.
I mean, they never admit mistakes. They admitted they made a mistake. Yeah. You know what the Trump administration says? We can't do anything about it. Can't do anything about it.
All Trump has to do is call the president of El Salvador.
So he has so little empathy that he admits he put this person in this hellhole by mistake, but he's not going to help the guy get out. I mean, it's just insane. Anyway, Bonnie from Brookline, thank you for calling.
Hello, Bonnie.
Oh, good morning. I think I'm a first-time caller.
Thank you.
I said to your screener that you might not even want to put me on because I just find this to be an incredibly frightening time. I think that it's just a way of giving the whole country permission to stop caring about other people. And you say that this guy that Trump could call and correct this error. It's not an error. It's a way of just moving the whole country in a very, very dangerous direction. And they're just going to keep pushing through. I just had this conversation with my husband this morning. It's a very frightening time, I think.
Bonnie, not only will we not want your call, that I think you expressed it beautifully. That is what's the line? Cruelty is the point. And you're right. And thank you. We got to get rid of you only because your connection is horrible. Dan texts, I was stunned when I realized we're doing absolutely zero to help after this earthquake. This is Myanmar and Thailand. When has the U.S. sent nobody to help in a crisis like this? And by the way, part of the reason we're having a problem doing anything more than the very minimal amount is because of the destruction of all the infrastructure that would go to the aid of countries that are at risk.
So that means the lack of empathy is in, Jim. Here's an anonymous
Read
texter.
the second text. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, Jesus the weakling.
Exactly.
Texting. Then it says, anonymous texter says, wait, is Christmas the same as DEI? That's a good one, too.
Allison in Worcester, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Thank you so much for calling. Hi, Allison.
Hi, how are you guys today?
We're well. Thank you for calling.
So I'm a social worker that works with homeless veterans, and empathy is the ability to understand and to have an emotional response to someone's needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that my ability to have empathy with those that I work with allows me to serve them better and to help them with their needs, give them better housing faster and better, and to help them with the other things that they need, because it's never just about housing. So empathy allows me to do a better job. A person with empathy has more skills and has more knowledge, in my personal opinion.
Well, a person with empathy, I mean, part of the reason I think, you said it beautifully, Allison, but I also think one of the reasons we have empathy, even if this part is subliminal, is we hope when we're in need, other people are going to care about us and come to help us and defend us. And I guess people in great positions of power, the Musks and the Trumps, don't care about such things because they think they don't need them. Allison, thanks for your work and thanks for your call.
You know, in this David French column, it's from a while ago. It's from it was in February.
New York Times?
Yeah, but the headline is "Behold the Strange Spectacle of Christians Against Empathy." He says, few things illustrate this reality more clearly than the Trump administration's decision to unilaterally and often unlawfully defund Christian organizations, including evangelical organizations that serve the poor and the marginalized at home and abroad. And I mean, it's really tough, I suppose, if you're calling yourself an evangelical and a Christian, you're running to church every week to get behind somebody who's defunding the food kitchens and all the programs for the poor in the United States and all around the world. You can't justify that. So that's why you're having this pretzel-like twist into empathy is just, out the window. The devil is lurking, as that crazy guy just said in the clip you played, among the people who are empathetic, Jim.
Not between, among.
Among, that's right.
Before we take a break, the statistics I read in several places where this is an average of the numbers and talk about lack of empathy, the total evisceration of USAID, the experts whose research I've read said that vaccinations will not go to roughly 75 million people in the next year because of the decimation of USAID. And how many people they predict will die, mostly children? As a result, 2 million.
2 million.
2 million people will die because we don't care about people who don't look like us in other places. It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
Got to take a break.
877-301-897 is the number. We're talking about this weird turn. The religious right has turned against the old religious right. The old religious right used to be empathetic and worrying about the poor and starving, but that's yesterday's news in the age of Trump. It's out the window. What do you make of it? 877-301-897. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, the American Revolution in living color. As we near the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, we kick off our series with the Museum of Fine Arts, looking at works in their collection that offer insight into the people who participated in American history. Plus, Joyce Kulhaywick is here for Stage and Screen with a roundup of must-see plays, movies, and TV. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Turkish Airlines, flying to over 300 destinations worldwide, including Athens, Seoul, Mumbai, and more. A complete list of destinations and more information is available at turkishairlines.com. And Pro Arte Chamber Orchestra, presenting The Passionate Viola, with works by Haydn, Stravinsky, and Pulitzer Prize winner Jennifer Higdon. Sunday, April 6th at 3. Ticket information at proarte.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. In a couple of minutes, we'll be joined by a very busy person, the head of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, Carol Rose. In the 12 o'clock hour, we're going to be joined by the former ambassador to Denmark, talk about timely, who also, by the way, after he was ambassador to Denmark for Barack Obama, was the chief of protocol for Joe Biden. So there's a lot to talk about there as well. But right now, we were inspired by a quote by Elon Musk. The fundamental weakness in Western civilization is empathy, the empathy exploit, he calls it. And we want to know whatever happened to empathy. Peter in Somerville, you are next. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
Yeah, so my mother is a full MAGA supporter, and my whole life she taught me empathy and caring about others. And lately, every conversation I've had with her, she says someone's retarded, someone's evil, someone's trying to attack us. And I always say, where are you getting this information? And she says, look out there in the world. This is how the world is today. And if you really think about it, that's it. Trump's entire platform is to scare all of these people that there's a very evil world out there. And I think it's very hard to have empathy when all you believe is that every person around you is trying to take something from you or attack you. And I told her I had gotten rid of my Tesla, and her first response was, oh, you're retarded like the rest of us. And I said, Mom, why would you talk to me that way? I've never heard you say that to me in the 35 years I've been alive. And she's like, well, why would you go and do that? And she attacked me. And I said, you have to reflect on how you're speaking to me. I'm your son. So they just regurgitate the same old stuff, and they have no space for empathy anymore.
How hard is this for you, Peter? I don't mean big picture. I mean small picture with your mother.
Oh, it's very hard. Every conversation, an insult gets thrown, a big news segment gets spoken about, and I keep trying to say to her, what changed? Because I haven't changed, but you have changed. I've known you my whole life, and you're different. And she's done some reflecting, but then the next time we talk, things go off the rails pretty quickly.
Wow, that is an incredible story, Peter.
I think a lot of
I
blame a lot of Fox News because there's a lot to blame there, but the whole stoking is fear and anger, and other people are horrible people. Somebody Rebecca from Melrose just texted about Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, which is a really good read, but one of the points in that book is dehumanization is necessary for the execution of systemic oppression. Right. Empathy and dehumanization can't coexist. We have to stop acting shocked and see the truth of what's happening. And that's, I think, what's happening with a lot of people who are coming here from other countries. They're dehumanized. They're not real people. Because you say to yourself, if you were sitting in El Salvador has improved now. I didn't know because of the draconian policies of this new president. Well, improved by
taking away civil rights.
Yeah, it's throwing everybody in this prison. But if you were living in El Salvador like 15 years ago and your sons were all threatened by gangs and you were afraid they were going to shoot you and they'd already shot members of your family, you couldn't work, you couldn't get a job, what would you do? You would probably try to leave the country, but people don't seem to think about that. The desperation it would take you to leave your home and go to another country and walk through the jungle to get there and walk through the desert to get there and maybe die on the way. Dan from Dedham.
Dan, before we take you, I just want to read something and play something. Don't go away. Tricia in Situate, do you want to talk about a guy with no empathy? Look at his response when I asked about the missing dead soldiers or the plane crash in D.C. Blame DEI. Do you remember the first words out of Trump's mouth after the plane crash?
Yeah, well, he blamed DEI. And he called the people who served or died for their country losers and suckers.
Losers. Now, also, one of our coworkers obviously feels we've been very unfair to Elon Musk. They say, I don't know who did this, that in Musk's defense, he has been calling for more empathy for Tesla and Tesla stockholders. Here he is during an interview with Brett Baer a few days ago on Fox, criticizing Tim Walz for having no empathy. Here it is.
You had Tim Walz, who's a huge jerk, running around on stage with a Tesla stock price where the stock price had gone in half, and he was overjoyed. What an evil thing to do! What a creep! What a jerk! Like who derives joy from that?
Who derives joy? About 60% of America,
well,
I think, derives joy from it.
I mean, there's something wrong with Elon Musk.
Oh, you think so? I hadn't noticed that. Really?
I think there is. I think there's definitely something wrong. Dan from Dedham, thank you for calling.
I'm sorry, Dan. Hi.
Hey, I agree with you guys that the decision that people have made to sort of prioritize whatever Trump's policies are and twist themselves into a pretzel and then give up on empathy was really weird. But you can go back, remember Margaret Thatcher was a Ayn Rand devotee.
Yeah.
And she said, there's no such thing as society. And I think that's sort of like the beginning of the major turn towards right-wing politics was Reagan Thatcher.
Oh, with the welfare, and Reagan with the welfare queens. Right, that's a very good point, Daniel. Go ahead. Daniel.
Whoops.
Oh,
We lost
connection
him.
disappeared. That's a very good point, Thatcher. And then again, as I said, and I think that's where Daniel was going. The welfare queen line was sort of government by anecdote with Ronald Reagan. That is when it started, but it's obviously been elevated to an art form with Trump and Musk, I think.
Well, remember when Paul Ryan, who was in the first Trump administration, he was Speaker of the House. He talked about Ayn Rand, and she wrote the Atlas Shrugged and the Fountainhead and those books about basically a dog-eat-dog world. That she was his favorite writer, and that's what he believed. He got the first big tax cut through, as you may recall.
877-301-8970. I know this is not deep, but let me say it anyway. If empathy is disappearing from so many people's thing, then it really does give permission to Trump to do virtually everything except those things that affect you in a harmful way, right? Because everything else is affecting somebody else, and it's okay because empathy doesn't matter anymore, right?
Yeah. What's weird is that these stories talk about Christian nationalists. I mean, they could. People forget that the reason they got onto the Baptist Convention used to be pro-choice, but the reason they switched is because that was when the Supreme Court said they had to get rid of these all-white academies in the South, and there had to be segregation in the public schools, and they realized that it wasn't, the look of going after these little 5-year-old black kids who wanted to get an education and 7-year-old black kids wanted to get an education. It wasn't good. It wasn't a good look. So they decided they would switch from the anti-black in the school thing to abortion. It wasn't because they had some deeply held feeling about the unborn, and they managed to turn that into a wedge issue that has worked really well all these years for them. And I think that's what they're doing now. They're turning this into some kind of, people to justify what's going on at the border, what's going on with these migrants, what's going on. I mean, we're going to talk about this throughout the show, with people getting snatched off the street and shipped off to Louisiana. They got to justify that with this ridiculous empathy thing.
By the way, do you know who, one of those all-white academies, do you know what famous local family was responsible for one of those all-white academies? I think in South Carolina.
No, I don't.
The Yankees.
Oh, the Yankees. Oh, that's right. That's right.
Red
That's
Sox,
right.
The Yankees.
Yeah, that happened in the 70s. Anyway, Aaron and Newton, thank you for calling.
Good morning.
Hi.
I want to suggest the problem is that these are profoundly lazy people because they're afraid that if they think about someone else, it becomes confusing to them and they have to adjust their conclusion to match extra knowledge. Most people make a decision first on how they feel, and then they adjust their conclusion based on what someone else might, the effect that it might have on someone else. When you don't have to take that second step, you never have to change your initial conclusion. And by the way, I think this is exactly on point with the attack on education and history, because they're afraid that if you learn about other people, you might accidentally learn that their position and the effects on them are different from what you actually want to do in the first instance.
I think it's a wonderful analysis. Aaron, thank you for the call. By the way, just because it's aggravating me, and I assume that was the purpose, an anonymous texter says, Trump never called soldiers losers and suckers. This has been fact-checked over and over. Never said it. Maybe you folks should correct it on air. And we would correct it if you were right, but you were not. Do you know who is quoted as saying that he said...
John Kelly.
John Kelly.
Yeah.
General John Kelly,
who
former
lost
chief of staff.
his own son.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Well, I mean, the anonymous texter is in that...
anonymous texter,
lying,
by the way.
news whole place, which people continue to believe, even though lots of people have pointed out. I mean, the incredible thing about Fox, how much do they have to pay?
$800 million.
$800 million for lying about the war being lost. They had to pay for lying over and over again, even though they knew it wasn't true. And people still tune into them and believe they're telling the truth, and they blame people that are telling the truth, like the major newspapers. The Wall Street Journal, by the way, a Rupert Murdoch-owned newspaper, and Rupert Murdoch also owns Fox News. What are they doing in the Wall Street Journal?
That's incredible.
Trashing Trump.
Who wrote that piece the other day? We were talking about that. There's a wonderful piece in the Washington Post, which we should have talked about, which will give some of you heart who are worried that the world is falling apart, which it is. The headline is something like Cracks in MAGA, and it's Aaron Blake or somebody who details a whole litany. You brought it to my attention, of Wall Street Journal editorials, obviously owned by Rupert Murdoch, which are generally supportive of a conservative agenda, which totally eviscerates Trump on everything, from the chat, the signal chat, to the tariffs, to virtually everything.
And one last thing, don't forget the reason that Fox News, which admitted that Trump won the election, decided to do a 180 and say he lost the election, was all about ratings. They were losing money. So that's why they switched. They knew he lost the election, but because they had viewers going to American News, I don't even know the name of those other crazy stations that are on there.
Newsmax. All stuff,
yeah, that's why they did a 180. It wasn't because they were concerned with the truth.
By the way, Dana Milbank is the one who wrote the terrific piece, thank you, Jamie, in the Washington Post. Check it out.
Okay, we are done. We're moving on. Up next, well, actually, we're not done. We're going to talk a lot about immigration coming up because we're going to be talking to Carol Rose, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. We're going to talk about immigration, these law firms folding, these colleges folding, on bending a knee to Donald Trump. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Mapping out human genes is a key part of understanding cancer, but so far that research has been based largely on patients of European descent.
And so we are really handicapped in trying to understand cancers in people who are non-European because we just don't have a lot of data available.
How a Ghanaian scientist is trying to change that, that's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And the Massachusetts Health Connector for Business. New premium value plans can help small business owners find and offer accessible employee health benefits. Learn more at mahealthconnector.org/business.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie, and we're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're now joined live at the library by probably one of the busiest people in America, Carol Rose, Executive Director of the Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. Carol, welcome. It's good to see you.
Great to be here.
Well, Carol, we all saw the terrible video of Rümeysa Öztürk being hauled off the street in Somerville, the PhD student at Tufts. You're on her legal team. What's going on?
Oh, well, it's just ongoing. That's what I would say. So for people who didn't see it, I really encourage everybody to take a look at the video. And by the way, also to read the reason that she got picked up, which is an op-ed that she co-authored with other people
Marjorie
in
read it
the
yesterday.
student newspaper
Nothing
at Tufts.
supporting Hamas in that op-ed at all. They're conflating being concerned about deaths in Palestine and in Gaza with Hamas. Two different things.
And if you contrast her speech in that op-ed to what happened to her when you watch the video, you can just really see that the disparity between what she's doing and what our government is doing to her and to other people and could do to all of us if we let them get away with it. And that's why the ACLU has stepped up to help her, to file the habeas petitions on her behalf, to file the complaint that we filed last Friday. And the government's response is due today before 5 o'clock.
She's still in Louisiana, right?
She's still in Louisiana.
And their contention, like the Trump administration's contention on everything that they're told to stop doing, oh, we did it before you told us to stop doing it. Is that's the line here,
That's
right?
what they're saying, but we don't have any evidence that that's true. So, you know, we're going to fight it out in the courts, and I just think it's so important that we recognize that what's going on with immigration and higher education and freedom of expression and freedom of religion, all these things, they're very interconnected, and that's where the ACLU is at its finest. I mean, we were made for these moments, and that's why we're in the courts and we're fighting it.
Here is before we do this, just to show how when you work for Donald Trump, you will say anything about anything. Here is Marco Rubio, who, for example, used to love USAID when he was a senator, and of course now it's the root of all evil. Here he is defending the behavior of the ICE people directed at this tough student.
If you apply for a visa to enter the United States and be a student, and you tell us that the reason why you're coming to the United States is not just because you want to write op-eds, but because you want to participate in movements that are involved in doing things like vandalizing universities, harassing students, taking over buildings, creating a ruckus, we're not going to give you a visa.
Which of those did she do, by the way?
None of the above.
None.
You know, and I think it's so important that, like, grabbing somebody off the street and stripping them of their student visa and detaining them solely on the basis that they wrote an op-ed in the student newspaper is so deeply un-American. It's obviously illegal and unconstitutional, but it's also unpatriotic. And I think people need to understand the First Amendment protects everyone in the United States, not just U.S. citizens. And it's also important to know that we're not going to stop fighting until she's back home with her community and these charges are dropped.
The other day, I know you know this, we spoke to your counterpart and buddy, Donna Lieberman, who runs the
Donna's
Civil Liberties
wonderful.
Union in New York, old friend of mine from decades ago in New York City too. She is among the groups, the ACLU there is among the groups representing Mahmoud Khalil, the guy who graduated from Columbia. He's still in Louisiana.
He's also still in Louisiana. And also another case down at the ACLU Virginia is working to free a Georgetown professor who similarly was picked up. So they're saying they're going to pick up like 300 people. Marco Rubio saying he has a list of 300. And so we're trying to find out, you know, who they are and to make sure that we move rapidly. We have a rapid response to try to make sure that we're able to provide them with the legal representation that they need and that they deserve.
Why do they take people to Louisiana?
Well, they take people to Louisiana for a couple reasons. One, it's like a horrible, scary place, and they want to make sure people are down there. But also, when you look at the courts down there are much more friendly to the Trump administration's policies than the courts are up here. So they want to try to get them down there as a way to get jurisdiction, and that's why it's so important. So like in the Khalil case, the habeas petition, and a habeas corpus petition actually means produce the body, right? That's what that Latin means. And so you file that, so the government can't just disappear people like they used to do in Argentina and other places. So we file those quickly so that we can get jurisdiction in a place close to their home communities so that they can be set free and you know, get bail and things
And
like
since
that.
we were just talking about empathy-free America, for you empathy-free listeners, Khalil is a legal permanent resident of the United States. Öztürk had all the appropriate visas to be there.
They've not been accused of any crime.
No crime.
There's no allegation of any crime whatsoever.
And there's a bunch of these cases, as you mentioned. This Financial Times just highlighted a few of these people. There was this Becky Burke, this Welsh backpacker detained for 19 days.
Is that the one on the Canadian border?
Leg chain.
LA, I'm sorry.
Yeah, leg chains, waist chains, and handcuffs. Her father said she's not Hannibal Lecter. She was traveling on the wrong visa. And there was this Canadian actress, Jasmine Mooney. She was held for 12 days because she went to try to renew an expired work visa at the border, and she was hauled off for 12 days.
Right.
I mean,
it's just terrifying.
It's just incredible what's going on.
It's terrifying. And I just want to say it's really important that people understand this is illegal. Just because they're doing it and say they can do it doesn't make it true. And that's why the courts are so important. You know, the courts are providing a speed bump and hopefully ultimately a barrier to some of these worst actions that are happening. But don't buy it when people say, well, there's nothing we can do. There's so much we can do. They want us to feel despair. They want us to give up. And so it's patriotic and important that all of us understand that there's a lot that we can do in the courts, but outside of the courts to preserve our democracy.
We want to talk about outside the court, but can we talk about the stay in the courts for one second?
Yes, I have a question over the immigration courts, too.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I'm blowing my two more things here, but in any case, this guy Garcia, the sheet metal worker that was taken off to Venezuela, and he was under protected status, that was illegal as well. The Trump administration says there's nothing they can do because he's now in El Salvador.
Even though they admit that they were wrong in doing it.
In front of the court. Is incredible that they actually admit they made a mistake.
They're just scofflaws. They just ignore the law. And there are lots of things that they can do. And there are things the courts can do to force them by holding people in contempt, moving to disbar people, filing Rule 11 sanctions. So there are tools in the toolbox.
So Trump could get this guy out of that prison if he wanted to.
Well, obviously he could.
Yeah, I mean, they sent millions of dollars down there to El Salvador to take them.
Imagine if that was
your
your brother whisked off the street here at Boylston Street to a prison in El Salvador, and the government said, sorry.
He wouldn't care if it was his brother.
Right.
Can I tell you something? But, you know, I understand the courts and the importance of the courts. Huge, however. We talked to this guy, Philip Holsinger, yesterday, the guy who's the photojournalist who was actually on the tarmac that in El Salvador, greeted the plane with, 238 Venezuelans. So a court determines you can't send them to El Salvador. Oops. We did it. In fact, the president of El Salvador said, oopsie, too late, allegedly too late. We don't know if they're lying about that too. Then there's the case of the individual who the Trump people admit shouldn't be there to begin with. And then after an appellate court judge, whatever her name is, I can't remember, says the Nazis were treated better than this on the appellate court, they're doing the exact same thing with more Venezuelans going to El Salvador. So what the hell is the court doing if they're not holding people in contempt right now? The head of ICE, Tom Homan, whoever the hell it is.
Well, I think they are. I mean, the courts are issuing orders. And the Trump administration is appealing it, which shows that they respect the court order, at least to that extent. So right now, the case down in El Salvador, they've filed a petition on Friday to go in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. So we'll see how the U.S. Supreme Court rules on that. But I think it's important that we continue to strengthen our institutions. I've said this so many times with all of you. The democracy is a muscle, and the more we exercise it, the stronger it gets. So this is a time for us to flex. And that means supporting the institutions like the courts, like our state legislatures. We have to move in and use every tool in our toolkit, even if they're not as effective as we wish they were.
I understand that.
We still have to do that.
But part of the problem is there's nobody who comes here, other than maybe Ayanna Pressley, who talks about fighting back more than you. However, and here's the big however, we know of two law firms, Skadden Arps, $100 million slush fund for Trump's friends. Paul Weiss, $40 million slush fund, and then they write to their partners and with some BS. The head of Columbia, $40 million. I read Alan Garber's letter, the interim president of Harvard, when they were threatened to lose $9 billion in grants. Never says a critical word about Trump, just politely says, oh, we're doing great work on anti-Semitism. We know we need to do more. The guy at Tufts, the Tufts president, we read his statements verbatim while he said, we support international students, and he said something else, I forgot what it was. We stand by them. Not a one critical word about Trump. They're basically enabling this guy, in my estimation, to do what he does.
Well, so I agree, and I'm appalled by the amount of advanced acquiescence that's taking place. But also, on the other side, take a look at those who are fighting back, and let's talk about them. I mean, Wilmer Hale filed a beautiful, beautiful brief.
They're here too, right?
Yeah, and it talks about John Adams and the Constitution and all the reasons that you don't go after law firms or lawyers based on who their clients are. And they got a ruling on Friday on their side. Same thing with Jenner, I think it's Jenner and Block and Perkins Coie. And I think the Perkins Coie case, there are more briefs that are the summary judgment, the merits brief, what they call the actual arguments, are going to be filed tomorrow. And the ACLU is supporting all of these efforts to hold up our law firms. And I think it's important that when you have people that whether lawyers or college presidents or college administrators, and they do the right thing, and by the way, elected officials, we need to say yes. Like when they stand up for our values, we need to show up for them and to say
what
thank
do you mean? What do you mean? We're supposed to run down to the State House? Or
send them a letter, send them an email. I mean, join the ACLU action team if you want to have a vehicle for doing that.
You have a radio show? Or you were
well, I do. Well, I know what I can do.
But I think it's really...
There's a rally on Saturday. We should mention
yeah, there is, and I'm speaking at it.
You are, okay.
At the rally on the Boston Common
starts
on Saturday
at 11
o'clock. Yep, I hope everybody comes. But showing up, and it's, we need people to show up. And, historically, in advocacy, you sort of say, call upon your leaders who are doing the wrong thing. And that's important, but it's also really important to call upon the leaders doing the right thing. So when our elected officials do the right thing, say thank you, because you know what, it's scary for them too.
We heard this morning about Mass General Brigham. I mean, Mass General, one of the finest hospitals in the world. Now Trump administration is going after them, maybe because they provided trans care for I don't know why, but they're going after billions of dollars to that hospital. And you think to yourself, that's a big deal. In terms of healthcare, in terms of research, so what do they do?
Well, they should stand up. I mean, part of it is, these are hard things. I mean, I think we need to understand that when you're a hospital and you say, if we compromise a little bit rather than the whole thing, do we lose the whole thing? So I don't want to stand in their shoes and judge, because I don't know what the specifics of that case are, but I think that we need to fight back in the courts, and that's what the ACLU is doing. I mean, I think at this point, I forgot to check this morning, every day there's 5 more suits. I think we're up to the 30 or 40 suits now, just from the ACLU, and like 170 nationwide from people who are filing lawsuits. And they are speed bumps, and ultimately they're going to be bulwarks against tyranny. And so I think it's important that when these law firms do the right thing, when hospitals do the right thing, when universities stand up, I hope Harvard will stand up. We don't know yet what they're going to do.
Doesn't look promising.
But Harvard, which has the money, right, more than any other university, and is the world's leading university. I hope and pray that they will stand courageous and firm and not give in to this.
Well, I think, I don't want to belabor it, but every piece of evidence we have to date, like declaring neutrality on issues that don't affect the core of Harvard, to me, means anything that's going to get us in trouble, we won't say anything about.
You know, I fear you're right, Jim.
But one person we have praised on the air repeatedly is the head of Georgetown Law School, this guy Traynor, who stood up to this Trump election-denying head of the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. The reason I bring him up is he was the person interviewing Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor the other day about the rule of law at Georgetown Law School. And this is rare, too. We don't hear nearly enough, I don't think, publicly from Supreme Court justices outside the... Here's a little piece of what Justice Sotomayor had to say.
The fact that some of our public leaders are lawyers advocating or making statements challenging the rule of law tells me that fundamentally our law schools are failing them. This should be part and parcel of the curriculum of every law school.
By the way, that may not sound like much to most people, but it's so, well, tell us why it's huge.
Well, I mean, when we're lawyers, we're supposed to uphold the rule of law and the Constitution. I mean, when we take an oath to do that. And so they're violating their oaths. You know, they're going against everything that the law stands for. And we need to make sure that we defend that, because, like, who would want to have a law firm that acquiesced? If they can't defend themselves, why would they defend my company, right?
Well, I assume she's not just talking about law. I hope she's also talking about the lawyers who represent Trump, who are willing to go into court and say anything he wants them to say, no matter how unconstitutional or illegal the premise may be. What's your sense of, we're finally getting, I think it may be the Venezuelan deportation case. What people are putting a lot of hope in Coney Barrett because of some things she said, some votes she's recently taken. I know it's a useless exercise to try to predict the Supreme Court on anything.
Right.
What's your sense about whether or not they're willing to rein in Donald Trump's excesses?
You know, I just have to think, when the court itself, even Chief Justice Roberts came out and said, you know, they should use the appeals court, not try to impeach judges. I think when the institution of the court itself is so directly under attack, I mean, the Supreme Court is comprised of people who are lawyers, who are part of the legal community, and they are attacking that community. And I can only think that this court is going to stand up and say, not on our watch. And if they don't, then they have folded completely. And I cannot imagine they want to be that irrelevant and that vilified by history.
You know, an anonymous texter asked a great question. Where's ICE getting all these names and numbers of people? What groups are supplying them with the numbers?
Yeah, there's a couple of groups that have been highlighted. One of them, I think, is Canary Mission. And then there's another group I just read about. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
And so I think that may be where they're getting the names, because a lot of these students get targeted by these private groups and put up on websites so that they're, you know, doxed and other kinds of things.
Isn't the IRS also helping?
It might be the IRS.
I believe
is
the
also
IRS
helping.
is also helping.
No, it's another group besides Canary Mission. I can't think of it. I should look it up.
By the way, breaking news, courtesy of the New York Times, the Attorney General Pam Bondi says she will seek the death penalty against Luigi Mangione. He's obviously the guy who is accused of killing.
I just pulled up Canary
Mission.
They have been they're criticized for blacklisting and doxing operations targeting individuals critical of Israel policies and damaging their future employability. And it documents people. So that I don't know if that person, the tough student, came from there, but they're one of the groups.
She was on it, but we don't know if that's where ICE got her name from.
Yeah.
But we know that she was on it and that they targeted her. And the only thing that the Canary Mission said she'd done was publish an op-ed in the school student newspaper.
I mentioned the other day that there was a woman that went to Tufts. It was ran Hillel when she was at Tufts. She's a Jewish woman. She now runs a thing called the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, and she was talking about the supposed effort to fight anti-Semitism is not really much about fighting anti-Semitism. And that it was kind of a joke. And she was talking about that, you know, if the object were really to fight anti-Semitism, then they might not have, Trump might not have pardoned the people that were.
There was just a great piece published in the Chronicle of Higher Education by a couple of Harvard professors. One is Daphne Reyna from the Harvard Law School, and then another Harvard historian, talking about they analyzed out of Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, this Esther Project, where there's an intent to actually invoke anti-Semitism as a way to attack all people, including Jewish people. And it's a really fabulous piece. You guys should definitely have them on and have them talk about what they learned by doing this research on Project 2025 and Project Esther.
Well, somebody we did have on who's a leader both in a lot of forums, including the Jewish community in America, Alan Solomon, who was here the other day, has a piece in the Globe this morning, the title of which is Jewish Community Must Stand Up to Trump's Targeting of International Students. The subheadline, what happened to Öztürk, the Tufts student, your client, and many other international students will not make Jewish students safer, nor is it fighting anti-Semitism. So good for Alan.
Yay.
Good
I
for
agree.
him.
Great
He was
piece.
great.
And Alan Solomon's over at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts. So I do think the Tufts administration, at least certain people like Alan Solomon, are trying to push back. And I think that's important.
It's not Fletcher.
That we
It's
give
the other
them a
thing, the
chance.
civic whatever. He was
Center
dean
for Civic
of the,
Engagement.
He was the dean over there.
I think he left. Isn't he
He did,
retired?
but he's done wonderful work.
He's done
Former
wonderful
ambassador to
Tisch
Spain.
School,
also.
Tisch School.
Tisch,
Thank you very much.
So one last thing, back to where we started. I've only asked this question 100 times in the last 2 weeks, so let it be 101. You win the Öztürk case, we hope, at some point. Your colleague, Donald Lieberman in New York, wins the Khalil case. There's no reason to think that Trump is not going to keep doing Öztürks and Khalils 1,000 more times, is there? I mean,
well, and I will just say, and the ACLU will meet him every single time. That's what we're here for.
Well, it's great, and obviously the audience feels the same way, but what's the action that is going to discourage the illegality in a forward-looking kind of way? I mean, it's a case-by-case kind of nightmare, right?
It is a case-by-case, but at the same time, I think that, so the courts really matter, but the courts alone aren't going to save us. We need to have, firewalls for freedom. We need to pass bills in our state legislature, in our city halls, to make sure that we're protected. And then people need to take to the streets. And if it means going to rallies, that's one thing. If it means writing letters to the editor, publishing op-eds, making phone calls, taking whatever action is that you're able to take and wherever you can. And not everybody has the same capability. But for anyone who does, this is the time to stand up for America. I mean, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary in a couple of weeks of the shot heard around the world. And it was the people of Massachusetts who led the charge against having a king, against tyranny. Well, now it's our turn. So what are we going to do for future generations? Are they going to look back and say that we did the wrong thing, that we were cowards? No.
Hey,
courage is contagious. It's time to flex.
We're almost out of time here, but can they sue the government for being wrongfully detained?
Yes.
They can.
But not afterward.
Afterward.
Yeah.
So maybe about 10 years down the road. They
After they've gone broke paying their lawyer. No, in any case, you're doing fabulous work and important work, and we all thank you.
And so are you. I appreciate the Fourth Estate.
But thank you so much. Great to see you, Carol.
Thank you very much, Carol Rose. We've been speaking with Carol Rose. I shouldn't have said, hey, Carol Rose. That was rude of me. Sorry.
You said hey?
I did.
That's rude.
Shouldn't have done it.
Hey.
Too late now.
Rude.
We've been speaking with Carol Rose, Executive Director of the American Civil Liberties Union.
Hey, Carol. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Carol, for being here. After the new news, we're going to talk with food policy analyst Corby Kummer on Trump's immigration crackdown and its impact on our food systems, plus getting a metal bolt in your lunch. I might not like that. He's going to tell us about that. And the ins and outs of steak fries. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com.
To Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. Take an intimate look into the show-stopping life of the iconic Liza Minnelli. Don't miss a new episode of American Masters. Catch Liza, a truly terrific, absolutely true story. Tonight at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 2, Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library across the country. Farmers are struggling to manage their workload without a workforce as Donald Trump cuts off the flow of H-2A visas.
Standing on the national stage, Rufus Gifford is here. He's a former ambassador to Denmark under President Obama, a position made all the more relevant by this latest Trump administration talk of taking over Greenland, an autonomous territory part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump's reciprocal tariffs take effect tomorrow. As Trump sees it, the levies will help level the playing field for U.S. manufacturers and bring supply chains closer to home. Mark Zandi, the chief economist at Moody's Analytics, says that the longer the U.S. remains in a trade war, the higher the likelihood of a recession.
The uncertainty it's creating is doing damage day by day. So we can still turn this around. Therefore, the odds are less than even. It's because of the policy, and you can change the policy. President Trump did that in his first term in the first trade war, so he can do it again. But I fear that we're going down a pretty dark path here, and if we don't get off pretty soon, then odds will continue to rise, and we will be in recession later this year.
Zandi says the impact can be seen already in more cautious consumer spending, boycotts of U.S. goods overseas, and the U.S. stock market. It is Election Day in Wisconsin, where voters will determine the ideological balance of the state Supreme Court. Mayan Silver of member station WUWM reports on what's at stake in today's technically nonpartisan race and its political implications.
How Wisconsin tips on abortion, labor rights, and redistricting all hang in the balance. But who wins could also reveal where national political winds are blowing, says Wisconsin politics professor Anthony Chergosky.
A state Supreme Court election has basically become a stand-in for the popularity of a president and the popularity of the world's richest man.
President Trump has endorsed conservative-backed candidate Brad Schimmel, and Elon Musk and his outside groups have spent millions in support. Democrats who back Susan Crawford are trying to harness anger over Musk's campaign spending and the Trump administration's whirlwind past 2 months. For NPR News, I'm Mayan Silver in Milwaukee.
Layoffs are underway at the Food and Drug Administration. These come on the same day as layoffs at the National Institutes of Health. NPR's Sydney Lupkin says it's all part of an effort to cut the Department of Health and Human Services by 25%.
Emails went out to FDA staffers early Tuesday morning that they no longer had jobs. According to an HHS fact sheet, 3,500 FDA jobs are being eliminated. It says the drug, device, and food reviewers and inspectors will be spared. Many FDA staffers and their work are funded by user fees paid by the industry. Congress passed the first user fee law in 1992 to fund staffing to speed drug approvals. The fees are paid by drug and device companies as well as the makers of certain tobacco products. Some of the staffers funded by these fees tell NPR they lost their jobs too, but because they weren't paid by taxpayers, those layoffs won't save taxpayer dollars. Sydney Lupkin, NPR News.
From Washington, this is NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Leading historians, scientists, and environmentalists are calling on Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey to stop the expansion of commercial jet service at Hanscom Field. Opponents, including descendants of Concord luminaries Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, delivered a petition and letter against Massport's expansion plan to the governor yesterday. Anna Westwinter is with the group Save Our Heritage, and she says the plan could mean more than 6,000 additional flights at Hanscom each year, and she says she's worried it's in keeping with a broader trend.
Thoughtful planning for the well-being of future generations has been usurped by an increasing appetite for convenience, excess, and expediency for today.
The Healey administration did not immediately respond to request for comment. Well, more than 100 potential jurors are packed into a Dedham courtroom today for the start of what is or could be a very long jury selection process in Karen Reed's second trial. It's a process that many say will almost certainly take several weeks, given the immense publicity surrounding the case. It was also being discussed big time on CNN for a while this morning. In all, 275 potential jurors were summoned to Norfolk Superior Court for each day of the first week of jury selection, today through Friday. And a spokesperson for the trial courts of Massachusetts says if a jury is not impaneled by the end of this week, an additional 243 jurors have been summoned each day for the week of April 7th and beyond. It is 46 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with Snapshot, a personalized program that bases rates on safe driving habits, at Progressive.com. Not available in California or from all agents. This is NPR.
Hey, it's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back here tomorrow. I'm back here Friday. Mayor Wu will be with us next Tuesday at the library, taking our questions and yours. And State Auditor Diana DeZaglio will be here next Wednesday. Hello again, Jim.
And in about 25 minutes, we'll be joined by the former ambassador to Denmark, obviously a pretty relevant position right now.
That is correct.
In the Obama administration. He also worked for the Harris campaign and was the chief of protocol for Joe Biden, so a lot of things to talk about. We're joined now on Zoom by food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner, Corby Kummer. Corby is the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hello, Corby. How are you?
Hello, Jim. Hello, Marjorie.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Corby Kummer. So we talked to you a lot about a SNAP, a program for people.
Oh, wait, we have a question for him first.
We do?
So is Jeffrey Goldberg a sleazebag, yes or no?
He is certainly not. He's the only person who has behaved honorably in this entire Signal fiasco.
Okay, fine.
Oh, wait a minute.
If you don't know, he works
else.
at The Atlantic,
He
and
works at
Jeffrey
The
Goldberg
Atlantic.
is the guy who was on the chat, and Trump called him a sleazebag.
And there's somebody else who's getting a lot of kudos. Lauren Powell. Jobs, who owns The Atlantic. She's hailed as one of the few billionaires who's not in the media, who's not on bended knee to Donald Trump. And she, of course, is the widow of Steve Jobs. And she's one of your bosses there, right?
She's the owner, and she's allowed and authorized the hiring of many of the Washington Post star reporters.
That's right. Yeah, and the Atlantic does great stuff. But anyway, back to Mr. Cod Liver Oil. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's the health secretary now, and he's the one that is telling people to, vitamin A and cod liver oil for measles instead of really pushing hard for vaccines. Now he wants to allow states to bar people who are on SNAP from buying soda. What's the story?
Well, Congress forbids the restriction of SNAP food assistance. It forbids restricting it to say you can't buy foods we don't like sodas. And RFK Jr. is saying, yes, SNAP should forbid soda purchases and snacks. And West Virginia appeared last Friday at a big rally with a Republican governor of West Virginia who recently signed legislation banning artificial food dyes and preservatives, which RFK Jr. hates, and also said, I'm going to, it's a state-by-state decision, I'm going to apply for a waiver to allow restriction of SNAP funds in my state. No buying soda with SNAP in West Virginia. And RFK said, I'm going to authorize that. I encourage other states to do it. There's one catch. He has no power to authorize it.
It's incredible.
So it's not his province at all. It's Brooke Rollins at USDA. Now, Brooke Rollins tweeted, if one says Xing, her support for this and saying, I'm looking forward to the leadership of West Virginia and working closely with the Secretary of Health, that's RFK Jr., to have other states enact these restrictions. But again, what actually happens, and New York Times was reporting that her aides are fighting a tooth and nail with RFK Jr.'s aides saying we don't really want to authorize these. So what happens, nobody knows.
Can I make 3 quick points? For those who are saying, well, why? We've had this debate with Corby the last few weeks. We talked about it. Well, if it's government money and my tax money, why should they be able to buy unhealthy food? The research we cited last week, a recipient of SNAP is no more likely to spend money from his or her budget on soda than you and I are. That's one, not to mention that arguably people should be free if they're entitled to money to do what they choose. Number two, do you know what else he said while he was in West Virginia, Corby? Specifically to the this is RFK, to the governor of West Virginia?
Something like, I'll reward you if you lose 10 pounds.
Exactly. You should lose weight is what he says to the thing. And final, this is not really a food-related thing, but we haven't talked about this, and we should have. Speaking of RFK, the chief vaccine guy under him for the FDA, this guy Peter Marks, resigned the other day rather than being fired. And here were his parting remarks. However, it has become clear that truth and transparency are not desired by the secretary, meaning RFK Jr., but rather he wishes subservient confirmation of his misinformation and lies. That statement could be made not just about vaccines, but about almost anything RFK is proselytizing about. Don't you think?
Yeah, I do. And today is a particularly bad day because health departments, like all of tobacco control, has been abolished overnight at both FDA and CDC, all of tobacco regulation control. And so the parade of scathing resignation letters is, incredibly upsetting. Like the CDC communications director who said, I'm not going to start spreading misinformation and causing children liver damage from promoting vitamin A for measles and antibiotics that have no effect on the virus that causes measles. Scathing resignation letters, and lots of our friends who worked in the health system, we were encouraging, and they were thinking, we just want to stay to try to work rather than going out in a ball of fire. But the problem is this morning, as of 5 a.m., even the ones who were brave and wanted to stay are being fired, or else in this sort of sinister and weird move, they're being moved to the Indian Health Service, which doesn't even have jobs for them, but it's a way of moving them out of the mainstream. So that's what's happening today.
When you said tobacco regulations, what does it mean that if you look up? Explain that a little bit more. Being gone.
Well, I know that tobacco cessation, the department is being wiped out at CDC. Maybe the administration says they're going to move it elsewhere. Regulation was the more important way because remember, David Kessler, a long ago FDA commissioner, helped enable the ability of the FDA to regulate nicotine in tobacco and nicotine levels. And it was a way of reducing nicotine levels and reducing addiction rates. So it's enormously important, tobacco regulation.
By the way, an anonymous texter says, I'm confused. Weren't you all for restricting the size of sodas? That was the Bloomberg proposal in New York. And taxing sodas. That was the Patrick. I am and was. Now you're defending people using SNAP to buy that which you're against. Am I missing something? Actually, you are. My position is, and I think Corby's, everybody should be treated the same way. We should limit soda sizes, I believe, for everybody. We should tax soda and give it the health stuff. But if it turns out somebody's an upper middle class person like me is able to buy a soda, so should a person who is legally eligible for a SNAP benefit.
Jim wanted teeny tiny Coke bottles.
I did.
About 3 ounces in there. That was his idea.
Nips. I call them nips is what they would be.
Nips.
We're talking to Corby Kummer.
So speaking of food and drink, it's a little disconcerting to know that you might wind up, if you have a black bean and grain burger or a spinach artichoke ravioli, you could have a metal bolt in your food or pieces of rubber. A lot of foreign objects in food. Is this new? Or has this been going on forever? Or what's the deal?
I think it's been going on forever. So there's a Washington Post story about manufacturing areas that are, it's sort of comic and it's horrible, dropping bolts into food that make people choke. I think that was a black bean and grain burger and slider. Nestle said it was recalling several frozen. And, Stouffer said there's only been one potential choking incident to date. These are so ludicrous, they're kind of comical, but they're also horrifying. Metal shards in food.
Metal shards.
I think it's more that it's being detected and reported and that it's always happened. Even though I really would like to blame it for the lack of inspection and administration's pulling back on inspectors, I don't know that that's the actual reason. I think it's more just being noticed. And in the comic vein, the maker of Chomp's original beef sticks said it was recalling nearly 30,000 pounds of product that contained metal. They might want to change their name from Chomp.
Yeah.
By the
no
way,
kidding.
just so people are not turned off to black bean and grain burgers in general, the brand, I never heard of the Chef's Line.
I never heard of it either.
Was the name of the company, had the metal bolt in the burger.
But the thing I'm concerned about, okay, so this has been happening for a long time, which is terrible, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the FDA are supposed to be on top of this, but are they going to get these Doge massive slashings like everybody else, or
Yeah,
not?
of course they are.
Okay.
So the government has been careful to say that they haven't cut food inspectors, and today FDA cuts. They've only cut all of the people who make the rules for them and supervise them.
Okay, so watch out for the metal bolts going forward. I think a word to the wise, Jim.
And if you find one, don't eat it. It's that simple. So, Corby, we've talked a lot about how critical undocumented workers are to the food supply in this country. I have said to you about 500 times, why are the big farmers that are so dependent upon these people not speaking louder than they are? Well, while they're not speaking loudly, apparently the Farm Workers Union, remember when we had Dolores Huerta on?
Oh my God.
Co-founder of the Farm Workers Union with Cesar Chavez, one of the most
really impressive
inspirational moments ever. The Farm Workers Union is now organizing in places on the East Coast that had never been before. And some of the people, talk about courage, who are involved in the organizing are the people of, is it H-2A? That's the agricultural visa as opposed to H-2B, which I think is the non-agricultural worker. They're engaged in this even though they put themselves at great risk. It's really an inspiring story, but the question is it going to work? Meaning, are they just going to end up being targeted for deportation? Are they going to be able to I mean, what's the bottom line here?
I don't know what is going to happen. The story is that New York State apple workers are reorganized by the United Farm Workers Union, whose headquarters and stronghold have always been in California.
Sure.
And it was founded in 1962 by Cesar Chavez. There was recently Cesar Chavez Day and Dolores Huerta, who you were just talking about. But in, for example, New York State, it's Jamaicans. And they're on H-2A visas, and they apparently go home after harvest season. Will they be allowed back if they organize? Another interesting part of this Civil Eats story, which has been doing great reporting, unionization, is how by 2024 there was a tiny 10% of farm workers were unionized. It had come way down. It had more than been cut in half, partly because of immigration status, and partly because there was just a lowering popularity of unions. And I think farm workers have been afraid. You remember that huge owners in California hire goons, essentially, to come in and have listening sessions in which they tell them, you will be worse off if you join a union. And I don't know if that's been happening in New York State, but they don't feel protected by laws, even though there's a New York State Constitution that guarantees farm workers the right to organize. There were exemptions in other states saying farms could prevent their workers from organizing. That was one of the more horrifying.
Well, unless I'm wrong, the National Labor Relations Act, which protects people's right to organize, explicitly excludes farm workers, does it not?
Right, it's shocking. Yeah, and so it's up to state by state to protect workers, and New York State does.
You want to, for people, a lot of our listeners are too young to remember this, but I hope they know a little bit of history. We talk about boycotts a lot on this show, and most, it appears, either are too limited or whatever to be successful. It's fair to say the great boycott of, which obviously was the United Farm Worker effort under Chavez and Huerta and others, from the early 70s, late 60s, whenever it was a huge national effort and a huge success, wasn't it?
It was a huge success, and what I'm waiting for now is some kind of similar effort that allows plain citizens the chance to register their discontent and their unhappiness. And that was a way of giving agency to anyone who objected to this kind of inhumanity, like the inhumanity right now to farm owners who had applied to the USDA for funds that the Biden administration made available to build housing for workers, make their conditions better. And now those contracts are being canceled, or if they haven't been canceled, small farm owners are out hundreds of thousands of dollars they put into making conditions for their farm workers better.
Well, by the way, you say you're waiting for the next great boycott. I don't know if I'm telling tales out of school. Marjorie has made it clear that as soon as she makes one other additional huge purchase from Amazon, you're done with Amazon. Is that not what your position
That's
is?
right. That's right.
Maybe Sunday night, and then after that,
Sunday night. Yeah,
I'm right with you.
All right, that's right.
Okay.
So this is a great story about the Army's lousy food, and it begins with this quote. Apparently, there's an age-old Army marching song that describes a biscuit that rolled off the table and killed a friend of mine.
You never heard that song?
No, I never heard that
Can we try
song.
to get that song in the next few minutes? Thank you.
But anyway, they talk about how they have this horrible nondescript meat glistened with grease and tacos and gross tacos and Brussels sprouts with the green boiled out of them. But they may be facing a change now at the Army, at least in some of their bases. What's going on?
So there are periodic efforts to make Army food more appetizing and armed services food. And now this celebrity chef, I admit to not knowing, Robert Irvine, who had done TV shows, he had a temporary disgrace, he's come back, but he was first trained in the British Navy. And one of his disgraces, he was lying, he said he helped make King Charles's wedding cake, and he got boycotted from television. Can you imagine the magnitude of a lie, like that, losing somebody a job today, given the lies we hear every day? He's helping create, what do they call Victory, not Victory Gardens, Victory Fresh.
Yeah.
These small, sleek, really good cafeterias with pizza, with lots of meat-heavy dishes, but that's what armed personnel like, plus sweet greens like salads. And he's hoping to roll these out more. And the military is saying, we aren't cutting this with all of our Doge cuts. We're going to keep this pilot going, and we're going to try. The most interesting part of the story to me, let's just have a horrifying statistic, which is that 70% of active duty service members are overweight and 21% are obese. And recall that the original and most important U.S. nutrition program, school lunch, was started because after the Depression, so many school children, high school students they had scurvy, they had rickets, they were so undernourished that they couldn't serve in the military. So now it's just the other side of the coin. They're too fat to serve. And so there's got to be an effort to make them eat better. But the most interesting part of the story is all of the military eats at fast food places around bases because they hate the food so much. And it reminded me so much of in the school food efforts, starting before the Obama administration, definitely during the Obama administration, rules were enacted that prevented fast food outlets from opening within 200 feet, I can't remember the distance specified, of schools, so that children could not go out during the 20-minute horribly short school break and buy a burger, and also preventing McDonald's from having kiosks of the voluntary food, I forget the euphemism, optional food within. And obviously the military should be restricting fast food locations from such easy access to bases.
I know this is going to sound like an incredibly naive question. One would think that even if you don't, what's your line in all your columns in the old days? The last refuge of scoundrels, politicians.
Yeah.
Children.
Right.
Well, another refuge of scoundrels is we care deeply about
the
men and women who've served our country.
Yeah, they read it moldy bread, expired
but you
dairy.
would think,
it's gross.
Even if they don't give a damn about the people who are serving, they want them to serve well. And it seems to me not eating crap probably helps get you there. So, I'm surprised people like Seth Moulton never told us about this. He was a Marine, not in the Army. But do you know any of the history of this? Why haven't they been willing? Is it all about saving money and cheap, crappy food is better for our budget?
I have read things about it, and it's mostly money, the ability to do it on a large scale, resistance of a huge bureaucracy. But by the same token, I think that the military did have restrictions on what it allowed its canteens to buy. Because I remember my great mentor, Dan Glickman, former Secretary of Agriculture, saying if only SNAP and school cafeterias enacted and adopted purveying restrictions that the military has on military bases that could help. It's clearly not appetizing enough for the military. And while we're on the military, up to 35 to 40% of military families can face food insecurity because the military is paid so badly.
Isn't that horrible? Isn't that horrible?
That's another important fact that just falls by the wayside.
By the way, I lobbied your friend Dan Glickman when he was in Congress around legal services funding issues. So there's a odd link there. So before you go,
We have big story.
this is a huge story.
Big
New York
story.
Times.
New York Times, that's right.
What's it say?
Well, it says steak fries, deservedly reviled or underappreciated edible spoon. And this whole long story about the pros and cons of steak fries. I guess it's going to be a new ground round. Remember the ground rounds used to be around here all over the place? It's going to be opening one in Shrewsbury. And they're really excited about the steak fries.
No, they're not. The new owners said, we asked our potential customers, and not one of them, what they wanted to eat, not one of them said they wanted a steak fry.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
I had it backwards.
Okay, so first of all, one of our staff members, who's rather uninformed about critical issues, said to us this morning, what is a steak fry?
Yeah, I didn't know what a steak fry was.
Oh, was that you?
No, it was me.
Oh,
That's
oops,
right.
sorry.
Yep.
It was not an uninformed staff member. It was my coworker
No,
here.
I get the backwards staff
Okay,
member.
whatever.
That would be.
Could you describe, it doesn't have to be visually, do your best there, Corby Kummer. What's a steak fry?
Well, imagine cutting across a potato the long way and only then cutting it once lengthwise. So you'd have about an inch wide. Say you had a 2-inch diameter in a potato. And so you've got a very wide piece of potato, like a wide swath. So they're really wide and they're really big. And apparently it's hard to cover a plate economically with steak fries, and so they're uneconomical. The real problem is that all that surface area means they don't hold their crisp. You know, the cult of French fries is double frying them, so at the last minute you're keeping them crisp. But this way it's so hard for the grease to reach the interior and stay crisp that they get soggy right away. So they're uneconomical to cover a plate. They don't look particularly appetizing on a plate because there's only a couple of them, and they get soggy. But what's their utility? They can mop up sauce. So if you have like this great barbecue or spicy sauce that people love, and you want to use, this is a way people don't particularly want utensils, they can dip the steak fry into sauce, and they've got a great holder for sauce and plenty of grease to go with it.
You know, I always guess when we're talking about a particular food, whether Corby has ever even had one. I would guess, looking at you, that a steak fry has never crossed your lips. Is that a safe assumption?
No, it has. You know,
how many?
Nothing food is alien to me. So of course I've had a steak fry.
How many steak fries in your whole life?
At least 2, maybe 3.
That's what I assumed.
Well, by the description, I don't think we've been missing much. It'll sound very good.
Hey, Corby, can we end where we started for a second? What is Jeffrey Goldberg like as a boss? Obviously, everybody knows he's in the news because he was the reporter who was mistakenly included in that Signal chat thing. What is Goldberg like as a boss there?
He is humorous as a person and completely delightful company.
That's good enough thing. Do you want to hear the song They Say That in the Army by Jonathan Michael Fleming? Do you want to hear that?
Sure.
We have some of it courtesy of Marjorie's staff. Here is part of They Say That in the Army. Here it is.
Say that in the army, the chow is mighty fine. They say that in the army, the chow is mighty fine. A chicken jumped off the table and started marking time. A chicken jumped off the table and started marking time. Hey! They say that in the army, the biscuits are mighty fine. They say that in the army, the biscuits are mighty fine. One rolled off the table and killed a friend of mine.
That's okay, Jonathan Michael Fleming. Thank you very much. It's a beautiful tune.
Very good.
It's a marching song.
It's a marching song. That's right. The Deadly Biscuits, hard as a rock. Okay.
Corby Kummer, it's good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Corby Kummer.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Coming up after a quick break, What is up with Donald Trump's attempt at a land grab in the Arctic? We'll talk with former ambassador to Denmark, Rufus Gifford, about the administration's rhetoric around Greenland. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
For a long time, gambling brought money and power to crime organizations, until the government wanted in on the action. But who would get to control that great power?
Bob Crane's domain stretches as far as the eye can see.
He's responsible for 18% of the state budget.
Bob was not a banker. Bob was a showman. Bob was an entertainer.
On this week's Scratch and Win, the first lottery czar. Tonight at 9 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And GM Roth Design Remodeling. Dreams delivered. With custom kitchens, bathrooms, and additions. Serving New England for over 39 years. Learn more at gmroth.com. And Gentle Giant Moving and Storage Company. Employing athletes since 1980 and currently hiring to join their team. Gentle Giant is an equal opportunity employer. More at gentlegiant.com/careers.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Next Tuesday from 11 to 12, the mayor is with us for an hour, Mayor Wu. Next Wednesday, the auditor is with us for Ask the Auditor. That would be Wednesday. You may have noticed Greenland has been in the news quite a bit recently. That's the country where officials of the United States government went door to door in the capital of Greenland and asked if they'd like the second lady to make a visit, and everybody said, no, we would not. So we're joined now at the library by Rufus Gifford, who served as ambassador to Denmark during President Obama's second term. Of course, at the moment, Greenland is still connected to Denmark. Ambassador Gifford also served as the chief of protocol of the United States from 2022 to 2023 under President Biden. We'll talk about that too. And most recently as the finance chair of first the Biden-Harris campaign and then the Harris-Walz presidential campaign. Ambassador Rufus Gifford, it is great to see you again. Welcome back.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much for coming in. So before we get to Greenland, every time we do these things about the happiest nations on earth, it's always the Scandinavian nations. And you were up there in Denmark for quite a while. So why is everybody so happy?
I think it's, when you say the word happy, I think it's also almost translated incorrectly. I think they would use the word content.
Content, okay.
So, and Americans, of course, we're the least content people on the planet. We always want things to be better. But Scandinavians actually really do like their lives. They enjoy their lives, and they're pretty comfortable the way things are going. And there's something really wonderful and peaceful and happy about that.
Can't believe, wait, he's leaving out the most important thing.
What?
He purports to have been the ambassador to Denmark. It's hygge. It's the whole deal, right?
Actually, that's true, but it's connected to it. Because the concept behind hygge, which is sort of, we define it in English as cozy, but it's much more than that. It's kind of like, it's creating this moment, but it's appreciating a moment in time and really just focusing on the people you love, the people you're with. It's a lovely concept. Yeah.
But is it the social safety net that you don't have to worry about going broke because you can't pay your medical bills? Is that part of it, or what?
I think, it really is part of that, Marjorie. I mean, look, I am an extraordinarily patriotic American, but to see my Danish friends, deal with their aging parents, for example, where literally the state takes care of you until you're no longer with us and makes you comfortable in a beautiful, lovely way. And we all know, and we have American friends who've gone bankrupt taking care of their aging parents. And there's so much anxiety associated with that for Americans. So yes, it's just different. I mean, as similar as the cultures are, there's lots of similarities. There are a lot of differences too.
Rufus Gifford, Marjorie and I were watching Rachel Maddow on MSNBC the other day, and she played a rather lengthy clip of somebody's Instagram account. That would be you.
Yes.
You're responding to the Vice President of the United States saying that Denmark was not a good ally, and I literally thought your head was going to pop off your shoulders. For people who haven't seen it, can you tell people why you had that kind of reaction?
So, look, I do. I'm a bit triggered by everything Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are doing vis-a-vis Denmark and Greenland. And I come from this from a very personal place, but I actually think it's true with our allies across Europe and across the world. Look, I was the guy who would go to the prime minister or the foreign minister and ask for them, and this is a true, like fully true stories, I'd ask for them to go send their troops to fight ISIS in Iraq or remove chemical weapons from Syria or go fight Ebola in Africa. And every time and without hesitation, they said yes. And they said yes because a great ally, one of their best, what they would argue is their number one best ally in the world, was leading them there and asking them to do it. And, this is a country that has fought alongside U.S. soldiers in Iraq, fought alongside U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan, lost more people per capita than any country in the world other than the United States and Afghanistan. And for the vice president, I'm sorry if I'm getting a little fired up.
No, please do.
Look, for the vice president of the United States to say it over and over again to Maria Bartiromo on Fox News and then go to Greenland and say it on our base, it is so offensive to them. And so I think a couple of things here. One, I think our European allies need to hear outrage from Americans. I think that is fundamentally true. I get incoming all the time. Where is the outrage? Haven't you all seen what the West has been largely peaceful and prosperous for the last 80 years, in part because we've invested in these relationships. And it is so depressing to watch just Donald Trump and J.D. Vance just destroy the American brand so quickly. I'll read this because I actually posted this on Instagram last night too. But I got so many messages that break my heart. And one of them, and I'm paraphrasing, is from a U.S. soldier who served in Afghanistan and was given an American flag by his commanding U.S. officer. And this was in 2015, he received the flag. And he messaged me on social media and he said, "Do you know where I can return the American flag to?
Oh, God.
Because I don't want to keep it anymore, and I feel bad throwing it in the trash." And that is this is so fundamental. So Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are playing their game of whatever bizarre, twisted chess they are playing, right? But we have to understand the human toll that's being taken right now. And it's going to hit us. And I don't know where. We're going to have less Europeans. Obviously, we've seen some anecdotal information already that Canadians are traveling here much less. This will be true with Europeans. I think, take away Tesla. Those boycotts are very coordinated. But I think there's going to be large boycotts of U.S. products. And I think that and I don't want to make this an economic argument or even a political argument. I want to make it a human argument, because what is happening here, to me, is going to hit us in our heart, because we've built a whole lot of goodwill over the course of the last 80 years, and that is just being burned every single day right now.
One last thing about Greenland before we move on to some of your other work and politics in the future here, because you're intimately involved in the Democratic Party. One of the things you said in the video that was played on MSNBC the other night was, you said, obviously there's a great strategic importance attached to Greenland. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but you don't need to take it over to get there. You make the NATO connection. Could you briefly explain what you were saying?
Yes. So look, I get everything Donald Trump is saying. So there are national security reasons why we need to invest more in the Arctic. This is the situation, though. We used to have 17 military bases on Greenland right at the end of World War II. Since the end of the Cold War and a little bit before that, we scaled back dramatically. If we wanted to reinvest militarily in order to match what the Russians and the Chinese are doing in the Arctic, I think we should. But you know how you do that, Jim? You bring some of your best allies around the table and negotiate with them, and they would be thrilled. Same with the economic investment argument. He talks about minerals and the like. They would love, the Greenlanders and the Danes would love nothing more than for American investment in Greenland. But with an ally like Denmark and Greenland, you do this by leading with respect. Come in, bring them around the table, and actually have these conversations. And they would be so excited to have that closer partnership with the United States. But this imperialism and this authoritarianism just pushes them away, and it's so sad.
We're talking to Rufus Gifford, former ambassador to Denmark.
Yeah, before we leave this, I was just horrified to read this story. This is from a while ago, back in the 60s and 70s, but about the Danish government giving teenage girls IUDs without their consent. Half of the women that were in Greenland at the time, indigenous women that were there. So what was going on with that?
You know, obviously I can't speak to it. I only know the history, Marjorie, and it's obviously very, very disturbing colonial history there.
Was it a racist kind of thing? Or is that what they're thinking?
Look, I don't want to justify it. I do know the justification, but I think it's impossible to justify it at this point. And the current Danish government is very, very aware.
And they're suing. Some of these women are suing and hoping to get some recompense.
And you know, again, rightly so. We come from the United States. So I think countries have really, really problematic colonial histories, especially when you have, and this is one of the reasons why the Greenlandic independence movement has been so strong.
Yeah.
Not just recently, remember, Greenlandic independence, the movement towards Greenlandic independence has been happening for decades now. It's just more challenging than anyone thinks it's ever going to be.
Yeah.
Rufus Gifford, you were the chief of protocol for Joe Biden. What does the chief of protocol do exactly?
So you know that meeting in the Oval Office with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Volodymyr Zelensky?
Do we ever?
Yeah.
I would have arranged that.
So all foreign visits?
Any time a foreign leader is engaging with the president, vice president, first lady, we arrange that, both incoming and outgoing. So anytime the president traveled around the world, I would travel with him.
So Marjorie and I, on many occasions, celebrated the accomplishments of the Biden administration, but I'm sure you know, considering you had a close relationship with him and people there, many people are blaming Joe Biden for the mess that we found ourselves in, not only saying he didn't get out early enough, but that people who worked with him closely, we had Annie Linsky on, for example, from the Wall Street Journal, who wrote the first piece saying staff members knew that there was a decline in his, let's say, cognitive abilities. Did you see a decline in Joe Biden before that debate?
So I will tell you how I felt before the debate. I was in Atlanta. I was with a whole group of supporters. The debate was in Atlanta. And I could not have been more excited about that debate, because I thought Joe Biden was going to take it to Donald Trump. And of course, I couldn't have been more wrong. And it was a heartbreaking thing to witness, surrounded by some of the president's greatest supporters. Look, he was an 82-year-old man. There's no doubt about that. And I have an 82-year-old father. Joe Biden was always, I mean, I could tell stories from Air Force One when we're flying back from Bali, and he would make me stay awake and talk about what we could do better next time, kinds of things. Now, again, it is hard to think about it, because I think about it every day, Jim. In retrospect, is there something that I should have noticed? And the answer for me is no. I was in this because I believe fundamentally that the Biden administration did great things. I also think we were terrible at selling it, frankly, and I could talk about that a lot. But to me, I was in it for the democracy, and I believed in the leadership of the president, and I thought we were going to win. And obviously, we got it wrong, and that is obviously we see what we're faced with right now, which is heartbreaking.
So you and a woman whose name I forget have formed a firm to try to help the Democrats craft the future. What's the name of that deal?
Her name is Adrienne Elrod. You may have seen her. She's on TV quite a bit. She's a communications pro, worked for Hillary for a while, worked in the Biden administration. We did the last two presidential campaigns together. It's called the Elrod Gifford Group. Our essentially our thinking here right now is that I think a lot of people are frustrated by the direction of the Democratic Party right now, lack of leadership. I think, I don't want to speak for everybody here in this audience, but I think people are here because they're interested. They want to know what they can do to be helpful. They want to be engaged, but they're frustrated by the lack of leadership and lack of direction. And our hope is that, and I don't know that the answers are going to be found on the outside. I don't know. On the inside right now. I think the party has got to rebuild. They've got to find their core again. But in the meantime, we want to help try to find the next generation of Democratic leaders, for sure, but also help empower some groups that are doing great work in the moment, and long-term, develop kind of a Project 2029 for Democrats going into the next presidential cycle. We think about the next, everyone's focused on these elections today, but we can't just be thinking about the elections today. We got to win back hearts and minds, and that's going to take some work.
By the way, elections today, when Rufus, literally today, we're going to talk to John King about it at 1 in Florida and Wisconsin that are obviously huge.
I have been quite taken by a lot of the writing Ezra Klein did in the Times, the book's Abundance. There's a guy we had on last week, Why Nothing Works, talking about how one of the big problems for Democrats, we say we want to have child care, we want to have family, we want to have housing, but we never get it. And that we've been talking about the housing crisis in Massachusetts forever. We've been talking about Charlie Baker, actually a Republican, this idea of building more housing around T-stops, but it just doesn't happen. Like broadband that Biden was so pushing didn't happen. Like the electric charges didn't happen. So that's one of the big frustrations for the so-called lunch bucket Democrat is they hear all this talk, but there's no result.
Right. And again, I'm not someone who will ever give Donald Trump credit for anything, but it is hard to make the argument that he doesn't do what he's going to say he's going to do.
Right.
And the truth is, this is what I believe, and this is why I think we have to think long-term, Marjorie, on this. I think that we have to develop a plan of action for the future that is tangible, that people can sink their teeth into, and that is bold. And we can do it. It is about political will, and we might have to, break some glass, metaphorical glass, in the process. But I think that's okay, because we are at that moment. I mean, our democracy. This is very, very high stakes times, and we have to acknowledge it for that. And for Democrats to be the party of opposition that we need to be right now, we have to show that kind of fire and fight, but also big ideas, speaking to what people want from us.
It could be that Elon Musk ends up putting broadband in all over the country and fixes the high-speed rail in California, and then, people might be enamored of Elon Musk in a way they're not right now.
But when he takes away their Social Security, they won't be able to afford to go on it. By the way, there are a couple of texters that have interesting questions. Anonymous texter, this gets to the future. Please ask the former ambassador if he would go on Joe Rogan. He's an eloquent speaker, may reach some people who need to hear the truth about a relationship with Denmark and Greenland, and how important it is they remain allies. Obviously, there were stories as recently as yesterday about the manosphere. I think you were talking about a day or two ago, how important the Rogans and others are.
Yeah, Rogan said something interesting today about immigration. He was horrified by the people being taken to El Salvador that may not have been gang members.
So should not just you, but people like you be going places like that more than they do?
Absolutely. I mean, I would go on Joe Rogan in a second if he'd take me, but I'm not sure he'd book me right now. I do think we need to go, and this is something I think, not just Joe Rogan, I think people use as sort of an easy answer to that question right now. What we need to do is actually approach those influencers who have enormous audiences who are not overtly political. Remember, Joe Rogan didn't start as being overtly political.
He's a Bernie guy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to identify these folks who have large audiences, most of whom none of us have ever heard of, but that, people between 20 and 35 listen to every single day. And it's not going to be an overtly political podcast. It's probably going to be a podcast about sports or something else. But we need to be able to get in there.
Well, before I do that, do you know somebody by the name of Laney in Jamaica Plain?
I don't know. You're putting me on the spot, Jim. I'm not sure. Do I?
I think you're related. Tell my nephew Rufus.
Oh, Lane.
Lane, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Tell my nephew Rufus I am capital letters so proud of him. So you apparently do know Lane.
I do.
But can I tell you, no one admires, and I know this is hyperbolic, no one admires Michelle Obama more than I do. I mean, I've been saying she's the hope, she's got to run for president, that podcast. I mean, oh my God, to turn on and to listen to her brother, both of whom are fabulous, talk about, I don't know, the best coffee at this existential moment that you described beautifully a minute ago is so incredibly disheartening. Am I wrong?
I hear you on that. I just think
you don't want to answer the question.
No.
Okay.
I love Michelle Obama too. I actually agree with you. I think the problem with that is that, from Michelle Obama right now in this moment in time, we look to her for hope, right? We look to her. She gives these extraordinary, I think she's arguably the absolute best messenger that's ever existed in my lifetime.
Right, yeah.
that's what they want to hear from her. So it's hard, I think, when they hear other messages.
So back to what you said on that tape that we started. We have to show a little outrage here. You've been to practically every country on the planet, and as Marjorie will often say, if they drop the minimum wage by increase the cost to go to a college in France, public college, by $1, there'd be 2 million people in the street in like a nanosecond. What's wrong with us?
Hold on, we got the rally down here.
I understand.
11
Well, let's
to
see how it
2
goes.
in Boston
Okay,
Common.
let's see how
Supposed
it
to be
goes.
Across the country, the hands-off rally.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
What is wrong with us?
You can all go to that.
Oh, God, what a loaded question.
Well, you know what I mean. Why aren't we expressing more outrage except on Twitter?
Right. That drives me crazy. So this is one of the, I think outrage is vital right now, but I also think it has to be targeted and focused outrage. I think that one of the things that Donald Trump wants, sort of the idiots burning Teslas, right? We have to acknowledge that for what it is. I don't want to be defined by a bunch of anarchists. And I think that the truth is we have to be targeted, we have to be thoughtful, but we also have to be emotional and speak to people's hearts right now, because they are hurting. And Musk's numbers are terrible.
Yeah.
Trump's numbers are coming down. He is vulnerable on this. And we have got to provide an alternative in this moment that people can sink their teeth into. And that's why I think the more public, and I'm so grateful to the two of you for platforms like this and allowing me to tell a little bit about my stuff, because the more people hear about it, there is strength in numbers and people will feel empowered and not hopeless. I think so many people feel hopeless right now, Jim, and that's why I think you're seeing less of it.
So I know you're not going to want to identify an individual, but when you talk about future leaders of the party, the next generation, give us a small grouping of some people who you see as as of this moment, the best set of next generation leaders, with the caveat that you may leave somebody out. We know
Sure.
that. So who are those people?
Are you talking about people who run for president or people
leaders of the Democratic Party?
Sure.
Where they're running for president. If Harris runs for governor of California, do you know if she's running for governor of California?
She honestly, I've talked to her recently, her and her team. She doesn't know. She hasn't made her mind. Yeah.
So who are those leaders? And anyway.
Yeah. So I think that, look, you got to start right now with what's happening in the moment. Bernie and AOC are drawing crowds from around the world. And it's from around the country, and it's important. It's absolutely important, regardless of how I personally feel about how I want, whether or not I think they should be the future of the party or not. That's not relevant. What they're doing and how they're touching into something matters. Obviously, there are people like Pete Buttigieg, Gavin Newsom, Josh Shapiro, Wes Moore, Gretchen Whitmer, Raphael Warnock, Andy Bashir. I'm obsessed.
That's her guy.
Is it? Andy Bashir is your guy,
she
Marjorie?
loves him.
Well, I just think he's from a red state, and he's a Democrat, and he's done well. But Josh
Governor.
Shapiro's been getting things done.
He is.
He rebuilt that highway in 12 days?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good.
Wes Moore's trying to give him a run for his money with the new bridge in Maryland as well. But Chris Murphy is, of course, stepping up in a huge way right now.
He's been great.
He's been great.
Yeah.
And so I just think, we just listed a whole bunch of people, a diverse group of people, and of course, I'm sure, like you said, we're forgetting some of them. And we were just talking about this over there. I do not believe there's a leader in the party right now, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think they got to fight for it. And in this void comes great leaders. I mean, I hope, Hakeem Jeffries rises to the occasion and becomes the leader of the Democratic Party, similar to the way Nancy Pelosi did after we lost in 2004. And Nancy Pelosi became kind of the de facto leader of the party before Obama. And that's what I would like to see. But we'll see.
We should mention Cory Booker, because
he's still speaking.
He's still talking. He's been talking since last night.
20 hours or so.
Yeah, he's still talking in the Senate.
And I love Cory. I do. Most of these people are legitimate friends of mine that I've worked with closely over the years. And I'm excited about it.
Before you go, your energy level is insane, because we are just depressed nonstop on the show. So are you a hopeful person, or you consciously say, I have to project hopefulness to be successful in what I'm trying to do?
That's a great question.
Well, what's the truth?
I am a glass half full guy. Everyone would define me as someone who is hopeful and glass half full. I will say on November 5th, I have never quite been as low as I was on November 5th, Election Day. And in the months that followed, I left Twitter. I took a complete news blackout until the inauguration. But then when I saw the damage that he was doing, you just can't sit on your hands right now. So I was thinking about leaving politics altogether, but in the end, I decided to dive back in head first and talk about the stuff that I really care about and love. So
Elrod Gifford Group. Is that the name of the
Gifford
thing?
Group. Yes.
Will you stay in touch with us?
Anytime.
Ambassador
I'm right
Rufus
down the
Gifford.
street.
We
You
know that.
Yeah.
It's great to see you.
If we go to
Thanks so
visit
much.
Denmark, when should we go?
Oh, this summer. It's extraordinary.
Okay.
From May 1st through September 30th.
All
Extraordinary.
right, that's great.
By the way, he was a reality television star when he's ambassador
He
too, which he
was
doesn't
a
talk
reality
about. But he
television
was
star.
huge.
Documentary series.
Yeah, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
Okay, excuse me.
Thank you.
Documentary series.
Thank you so much, Rupert
great to
Gifford.
see
We're
you.
glad that Lane Gifford could call in from Jamaica Plain. Very
That was
proud of her
pretty
nephew.
good.
That was pretty
You
good.
turned
Thank
red
you.
for that one,
Yeah.
my friend. You did.
Thank
Good
you
to see
so
you.
much.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Rufus Gifford served as ambassador to Denmark during President Obama's second term, chief of protocol of the United States from 2022 to 2023 under Joe Biden, and most recently as the finance chair of the Biden-Harris and then the Harris-Walz presidential campaign. Thank you very, very much for coming in. Up next, two more things. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Summer vacations are right around the corner, and if you're thinking of visiting Paris and the Louvre, here's one thing you should know.
Never go to the Louvre on an empty stomach or with a full bladder.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. A new book walks you through the best way to navigate the world's largest museum. On the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Boston Lyric Opera, presenting Rodgers and Hammerstein's Carousel, an 80th anniversary production featuring Jamie Barton and more. Directed by Anne Bogart, April 4th through 13th at the Emerson Colonial Theater. Tickets at blo.org. And Hammond Castle Museum, presenting Eric Pape, The Fair God, the largest public collection with many pieces unseen for nearly a century. On view April 5th through April 27th. On-site parking and tours of the museum available. hammondcastle.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I'm talking quickly because two more things. There's going to be one more thing, and it's going to be sort of participatory. So Beacon Hill legislators use campaign funds legally to take fellow legislators or lobbyists, who knows, we don't, to high-end, North-End cigar bars. Do we know who the people they took were?
No, we do not.
Do we know how much they spent?
No, we do not.
Thank you. A key committee chair on Beacon Hill dates a lobbyist. He then apparently kills bills she's a lobbyist on. That is legal. Was he punished by the legislature?
No, he was promoted.
He was promoted. Thank you. And then that's both from the Globe. And the latest Globe reporting on the utter corruption on Beacon Hill. Well, can't say that because it's technically legal. Here's the deal. If a lobbyist gives money directly to a politician, Marjorie, there's a $200 limit, and the donor's name is public, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If a lobbyist donates money instead to a nonprofit that is run by the elected official, is there a limit on how much they can give?
No, there's not.
Do we find out who the donor is?
No, we do not.
They can give $100,000 instead of $200, and we never know what their name is.
Yeah.
And the problem is this is totally legal, and that's the point, that it is legal. Again, congratulations to the Globe for great reporting. And I guess what I would say is, rather than BS window dressing about transparency, members of the legislature on Beacon Hill should remember who they work for, Marjorie. Us. Not the Speaker and the Senate President, and they should resolve to restore some sense of morality and transparency to an entity that is often amoral and secretive.
We want to be glass half full, Jim. But
we do?
I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
I would say this glass is empty and broken. In any case, read the story in the Globe by Samantha Gross today.
It's
it
a
is
great
really
story.
great.
The outrage,
important.
the chutzpah. Anyway, okay, chutzpah, whatever it is.
That's it.
What did I say it wrong?
No, you said it right. Chutzpah. You did great.
Okay, coming up after the 1 o'clock news, CNN's John King is here. We're going to talk about.
You can access thousands of hours of PBS programs online with GBH Passport. If you're already a member, just register online today or become a member and sign up instantly at gbh.org/passport.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Seasons 4, the outdoor living store in Lexington, featuring over 100 styles of outdoor furniture delivered throughout New England, plus a wide selection of plants, statuary, and garden accessories. April event in progress. Seasons4.com. And The Huntington, with Ricardo Perez Gonzalez's wickedly funny tragedy, Don't Eat the Mangoes, the saga of 3 Puerto Rican sisters and their secrets. Now through April 27th, huntingtontheater.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Right.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Senate Democrats plan to force a protest vote today to block President Trump from imposing tariffs without congressional approval. Senator Cory Booker took to the Senate floor last night to begin a marathon speech that is still going. The New Jersey Democrat protesting what he describes as the Trump administration's disregard for the rule of law.
I can't believe we are here again, with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Americans writing letters, storming into town halls, hospital leaders, private sector leaders, Republican governors, Republican mayors, Democratic governors, Democratic mayors, all saying, "What are you doing in Congress?"
President Trump's reciprocal tariffs are due to take effect tomorrow. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt describes the action as a boon to domestic manufacturing.
The president's historic action tomorrow will improve American competitiveness in every area of industry, reduce our massive trade deficits, and ultimately protect our economic and national security.
However, multiple economists caution that American consumers will bear the brunt of tariffs in the form of higher prices. There's general consensus among analysts that the longer the U.S. engages in a trade war, the higher the likelihood of a U.S. recession. 2 special congressional elections are underway in Florida. NPR's Greg Allen reports Democrats hope to win the seats held by Republicans.
The 2 congressional seats in Florida's 1st and 6th districts were left vacant by Republicans who joined President Trump's administration. In the 1st district, Trump's original pick for Attorney General, Congressman Matt Gaetz, later withdrew and left Congress, leaving his seat open. The other open seat in the 6th district was held by Mike Waltz, who's now Trump's national security advisor. Democrats have contributed millions more than Republicans in both races. In the 6th district, 2 polls still show the Democratic candidate Josh Weil behind Republican Randy Fine, but his 3 or 4 point lag is within the margin of error. Greg Allen, NPR News, Miami.
Immigration enforcement officials are admitting that a man legally in the U.S. was deported to El Salvador by mistake. Here's NPR's Jimena Bustillo.
Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, a man from El Salvador, had first been detained by immigration officials in 2019. When going through immigration court, a judge granted him the right to not be deported back to his home country. Still, last month, Abrego Garcia was one of several men accused of being gang members and deported to a mega prison in El Salvador. Immigration advocates have sued the government, arguing that people didn't get due process or the ability to contest the claims that they were gang members before they were sent to El Salvador. The government acknowledges it made a mistake in Abrego Garcia's case, but government lawyers say there's nothing they can do now that he's in the custody of another government. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, Washington.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Some of the top lawmakers in Massachusetts continue to call for the release of Tufts University student Rümeysa Öztürk following her arrest by federal immigration officers last week as she was walking to meet friends for dinner. In a statement released yesterday, Massachusetts State Rep. Ayanna Pressley called Öztürk's arrest a 5-alarm fire and says she must be released immediately. The 30-year-old grad student, who is a Turkish International PhD student as well as a Fulbright scholar, currently being held in a detention facility in Louisiana. Meanwhile, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren also condemned Öztürk's arrest in a statement yesterday, writing that the Trump administration is ripping students like Rümeysa out of their communities without due process and undermining our basic freedoms. And there's a consortium of labor unions and allies, including Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, who will hold a rally in support of Öztürk tonight at 6 p.m. That is happening outside the JFK building in Boston. The city of Lynn held its annual Vietnam Veterans Day ceremony yesterday inside Memorial Auditorium. The event marked 50 years since the end of the Vietnam War. with a program of remembrance, recognition, and reflection. Lynn Mayor Jared Nicholson issued an official proclamation declaring March 31st, 2025 as Vietnam Veterans Day in Lynn. The event included remarks from city officials, veterans, community leaders, along with a reading of the 19 names of Lynn residents who were killed in the Vietnam War. 46 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Bank of America. From local shops to global enterprises, Bank of America is committed to helping businesses of all sizes make every move matter. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/banking for business.
Hey, it's Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're at the Boston Public Library, and we're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Couple of quick programming notes. The Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, will be with us next Tuesday at the library for another edition of Ask the Mayor, and the State Auditor, Diana DeZoglio, will be here on Wednesday at the library. Hello again, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. We're joined now on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, behind the brilliant reporting project All Over the Map. John, good to see you.
Good to see you. You're stuck with me this Tuesday, listeners. You get the mayor next week, but you're stuck with me
No,
today.
well, we love to talk to you, John King.
No stuck about it, my friend.
We're going to play a little sound, and you can tell us what's going on here, from Senator Cory Booker, who began talking last night at 7 o'clock. He's still going strong, I believe. At least he was up a couple of minutes ago. Here's a clip from early last night.
So tonight, I rise with the intention of getting in some good trouble. I rise with the intention of disrupting the normal business of the United States Senate for as long as I am physically able. I rise tonight because I believe sincerely that our country is in crisis. And I believe that not in a partisan sense, because so many of the people that have been reaching out to my office in pain, in fear, having their lives upended, so many of them identify themselves as Republicans.
So why is he doing this?
It's really interesting in the sense that we've talked now since the Trump inaugural at the end of January, late in January, about who will step forward for the Democrats. What will the strategy be? Who will emerge as maybe a fighter? There's great frustration. I was in Wisconsin last week. Great frustration in the Democratic base that they're not putting up a good enough fight. And so you see Senator Booker among the Democrats saying, okay, I'm going to try this. Now, he's a blue state Democrat from New Jersey. But remember, he did briefly run for president last time. He didn't have great success early in the primaries when Joe Biden became the nominee. But he did run briefly. We're going to watch a whole new generation of Democrats decide, what's my future? If you're Senator Booker, am I going to stay in the Senate? Am I going to run for president again? What do I want to do? But before the personal part, it's let's show the base that we're fighting, that we're talking about the issues. And so today's an interesting day. You have Senator Booker planting this flag, if you will, on the Senate floor. You've got some special elections in Florida, a big state Supreme Court race out in Wisconsin. I wouldn't make too much of it, but it's an early test of the electorate. You know, as we creep up toward 100 days of Trump back in office, prices are not down on most things. The tariffs are causing economic uncertainty. And so what do voters think, right? We know that Democrats in Washington are having a debate, and Senator Booker's trying to take a lead here in how hard do we fight? What do we talk about? What issues do we want to highlight because Trump is doing so many things? So I just find it a fascinating moment. This is going to be a struggle for the Democrats. And when one takes the lead like this, you've seen Senator Sanders and Representative Ocasio-Cortez going around the country, Ro Khanna, another House Democrat, doing town halls around the country. So we're watching this. I don't know that it's a competition, but we're watching the early stages of Democrats trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we fight more?
So, John, you said, I don't remember your word a minute ago, talking about a congressional race that is the National Security Advisor's old seat, Walls, in Florida today, and in Florida, right? And a race, an election, we're not used to that in Massachusetts, for a seat on the Supreme Court that'll determine, of the Wisconsin, that'll determine whether liberals or conservatives have the majority. You are not apparently in the school who think these have great significance. Why?
Well, I think they're significant, Jim. I don't know the right adjective before that. Is it great? It's a marker, right? The big election will be the midterms next year. We know what happened to Donald Trump in the midterms in 2018. Nancy Pelosi became Speaker after those midterms because Donald Trump and the Republican Party got shellacked in those midterms. That was the reaction to Trump. I do think this is important. I don't want to understate it. I just don't also want to overstate it in the sense that you have these two districts in Florida, Matt Gaetz's old district and Mike Walz's old district.
Right, Gaetz, yeah.
Gaetz's district is a Republican plus 30 district. Walz's district is a Republican plus 20 district, meaning Trump won that district by 20 points. Walz won that district by 20 points. Gaetz won by 30 and Trump, et cetera. So watch the margins. If a Democrat were to win in either of those races, that would be a shockwave. Then you'd be saying next Tuesday, John King, you were an idiot. You didn't say that was a big deal. I would watch the margins. Are Republicans coming out to vote? Are Democrats energized to come out to vote? Look, if a Democrat wins either of those special elections in Florida, the bedwetting I often assign to the Democratic Party will flip to the Republicans very quickly because their House majority is so small. But I would watch the margins in the sense that, so let's take the Walz district, Republican plus 20. Trump just won it 5 months ago by 20 points. Let's say the Republican wins by 5. If you are a House Republican in a district that Donald Trump carried by 10 points or that you carried by 10 points, you're going to be worried. You're going to start thinking about, am I supposed to support Trump 100% of the time? Am I supposed to be looking to raise my hand sometimes? The people back home seem to be mad about Elon Musk. So I would watch them that way. If a Democrat wins, that is a tidal wave, shockwave. But if the margins are very close, that's still going to give Republicans some jitters. Those are the two House races. Wisconsin is the ultimate battleground state, right? 20,000 vote margin in 2016, 20,000 vote margin in 2020. Trump actually won it by presidential standards, what I'll call a landslide. He won it by 30,000 votes 6 months ago. So what happens in that state Supreme Court race? I was just out there. Democrats are demoralized. They're still trying to figure out what went wrong 5 months ago, but Elon Musk has pumped a boatload of money into that race, and they have made him the boogeyman, the villain, if you will. And so that's not going to solve the Democrats' long-term problems, running against Trump and running against Musk. But does if the Democrats can win that seat 5 months after Trump won the state by 30,000 votes, that will give them a sense that, okay, we have a little mojo. Very important for the people in Wisconsin, by the way. It's an evenly divided state Supreme Court. Abortion rights, voting rights, legislative and congressional maps. It's hugely consequential in the state. But it will also send a national message about whether Musk maybe should step back, whether Trump in the White House starts rethinking Musk's role, and again, whether House Republicans or Senate Republicans from purple states start to think, is it? We've been marching lockstep behind this guy. Is it time to rethink that?
John, I was thinking about all the money that's being plowed in on both sides in Wisconsin. People know about the two $1 million checks that were handed out, allegedly not because you're voting for by Elon Musk for the Republican, but allegedly because you don't like activist judges. So as the moment he's getting away with it. But with so much money on both sides in a state like that, and I think of the interview you did with that woman in Wisconsin where you were talking about door-to-door work versus digital work and that sort of thing. How do you spend that much money in such a short period of time in a state like Wisconsin?
It's nuts, but they find a way to do it. Look, Joe, I always say, we should start a local radio station or a local TV station in a battleground state. That's our money. We can retire. Put your feet up. Get a big. You'll drink top shelf liquor and you'll have great cigars for the rest of your life. When I was out there, you cannot turn a TV on without seeing one of these ads. You cannot turn the radio on without hearing an ad. Every voter will show you their phone, and they're constantly getting texts and videos and Facebook ads and all that. A lot of people also say that people are disgusted by that and they're worn out by it. Wisconsin had 2 years ago, they had one of these state Supreme Court elections. Then they have the presidential election. It seems like if you talk to voters in Wisconsin, they think every 15 minutes they're being told the most important election of your life is tomorrow. Because they're in this, because they are such a battleground state. It's so competitive there. And there's always the next election. So they're exhausted. Whether you like what happened in November, don't like what happened in November, it's like, here we go again. So I'm really fascinated to see who turns out. Again, it's become a nationalized climate because of Musk and because it's a big battleground state. It is the first test of Trump, if you will. What are voters thinking about Trump since the election? So it is that's a bigger, I would argue, a bigger national statement potentially than the Florida races. but it's also a huge consequence to the people of Wisconsin, who they're just tired of constantly being told, this is the most important thing ever. But you raise a great question. How could you possibly spend all that money in such a short period of time? But Jim, somehow they figure it out.
I don't want to put you in a tough position because you were very careful not to editorialize. Marjorie and I have been debating for all the years we've been together. I believe we're one of the few states that doesn't elect judges. And I actually support that until I see a race like Wisconsin where they're spending, $100 million. And I guess this is your argument. And you see a judge or a judicial candidate campaigning just like a state rep would do in East Boston.
I think it's a terrible idea.
Do you have thoughts about the whole, without crossing lines that John King doesn't cross, about electing judges versus appointing them?
I think that in our polarized climate, and especially when you have a president of the United States constantly attacking the credibility of judges, it's an interesting question. I do think it's democracy, and the people in the states should decide how they do these things. I think that there are so many things in our politics that I think that if we could have rational adult conversations, and that's a state by state question. Yeah. I live in Bethesda, Maryland now. I'm from Dorchester, Massachusetts. I don't, what I think about what's happening in Wisconsin, it's really none of my business. It's up to the people of Wisconsin. But I do wish, whether it's campaign finance questions, whether it's how we elect judges, whether how we do other things, I wish every state and as a country we could have a rational conversation about things have gotten pretty ugly and pretty polarized. Is there anything we would like to reconsider? And just put all these ideas on the table and see how it shakes out. But that's the way they do it in Wisconsin, and it's not my job to tell them to do it differently.
Talking to John King from CNN.
And the reason I don't want elected judges is because they're going to be subject to the whims of what is the big issue of that moment, and they're not going to be making decisions based on what they think is the law and right and wrong. That's my problem.
Well, how do they get appointed by a governor or by somebody else, except making sure that they do things that make him or her happy?
But one of the things that you've seen. Oh, go ahead, John.
I was just going to jump in on that point. I do think that I'm going to make the case. It's not my opinion. I don't get one. But to make the case, the point you're making, in a state like Wisconsin, where you always have a pretty evenly divided legislature, you have to be careful. If you're the governor, yes, you get to pick judges, but you can't be a jerk about it. You just can't, or they're not going to get confirmed, or you're going to make the legislature mad at you. If you have to get them through the legislature, and if you start ramming through those judges, they're going to come back and get you. As I say that, there are people throwing things at the radio or at YouTube because they've seen what Mitch McConnell did, either denying Merrick Garland the seat on the Supreme Court, Trump and his Supreme Court appointments. Republicans have this philosophy. A lot of Democrats are a little bit jealous about this, is they don't care if it's going to, piss people off. They don't care if they only have a 1 seat or 2 seat margin. When they have power, they use it. And they're not afraid to do these things. I do think at the state level, if you're Governor Evers, who's not he's not an overly partisan guy to begin with, you have to be a little bit more careful if you're in an evenly divided state like that. It's but again, each state decides how they want to do this.
Okay, so let's talk about what's going on in Houston, where the governor there, Abbott, is delaying this race. What's that all about?
Well, again, this is state decisions about when you have special elections. Add to that, Trump just took Elise Stefanik's nomination for the United Nations away from her because he was afraid the governor of New York would hurry and have a special election there, and maybe Democrats would win in a heavily Republican district. And so you have the narrowest House majority in our lifetime. Republicans don't, have a vote or two to spare. And they've got 10 or 12 or 15, and maybe after we see what happens in Florida, maybe a bigger number of Republicans who are nervous about the midterms, who are in battleground districts. And so Governor Abbott is, essentially saying, why do I send another Democrat to Washington, right? Normally you would think it's just one vote. Just one vote matters a lot in the House right now because the margins are so tight. And so you have 2 vacancies. You have the 2, we're settling 2 in Florida today, and then there are 2 other vacancies, including that Texas seat. It's overwhelmingly, that's an overwhelmingly Democratic district. Hell would freeze over before a Republican wins that seat. But Governor Abbott can run the clock as long as he wants. Welcome to, politics 2025.
So, John King, as you were speaking at the beginning of this interview, I'm watching CNN over Marjorie's left shoulder, and it says, Trump says he is, quote, perfecting the tariffs before, Liberation Day tomorrow, as he calls it. So I know this is a risky business playing Nostradamus on tariffs. Do you have any idea what the hell he's going to do or not do tomorrow? John?
I don't, except he says it's going to be big, and he says he's not going to back down. And look, this has been, call it a merry-go-round, call it a yo-yo, call it whiplash. We've talked about this before, where he said, I'm going to do this, and then he's done either nothing and delayed it, or he's done half and then pulled it back. He has been radically inconsistent on this issue. He's done things and pulled them back. And what he's done in the process there is, number one, the price of a lot of things are gone up just because of the uncertainty. Our trade partners around the world, I've been to Canada to talk to people, but our trading partners around the world are mad at the tariffs, and even equally, sometimes even more so, mad at the indecision, saying, and in Congress, again, this is another issue where Republicans used to be the free market economy party, the free trade party. Trump has changed that completely to where it's much more of a protectionist party now. However, if you're Don Bacon in a battleground district in Nebraska, for example, where farmers, shippers, other people are affected by these tariffs, your phones are ringing off the hook, and your email is crowded with people saying, "Will you tell him please to make up his mind whether I agree or disagree with what he's going to do? Would he please just do it so I can plan my business, so I can think 6 months out as opposed to 6 days out at the most?" There is a lot of blowback here. So it's supposed to be Liberation Day tomorrow. Now Trump is saying again, now he's saying, we've talked about this before, that he's going to seek a third term. We can talk about that if you wish. But the next election that's going to matter most is that midterm election, and Republicans are getting nervous here because why did Donald Trump win? Prices were going to come down, and he was going to close the border. He's done some very controversial things in the immigration space, but crossings are down. So most Republicans are giving him grace in the immigration space. They're getting nervous in the economy, especially cost of living space, because the tariff debate and the tariffs imposed so far are going to drive up prices. They're not going to drive them down. The White House keeps calling it a tax cut. That's, if you can find an economist that agrees with them, I will yield my time for the next few Tuesdays.
Let's stay on tariffs for a second. The poll, I don't know, what CBS News, somebody did a poll on a bunch of issues yesterday. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And I believe the least popular major initiative of Trump's were tariffs. And even if Donald Trump believes in what he says and is correct that it's going to spur local manufacturing, discourage the purchase of foreign goods, that's not going to happen in a week or a month. It's going to take you don't build a new auto plant next Friday, even though I assume he'll have some announcements. Jane Doe is going to build this, they're going to build that. I don't understand the thinking around this for those reasons, plus the queasiness of so many Republicans in iffy districts. What is the thinking on the part of the Trump people about this tariff thing?
Well, a couple things. He is wildly inconsistent on many policy issues. This is something where he has been consistent since the 1970s. He's been very protectionist back when he was a Democrat in those days, very protectionist, saying we should have tariffs to support American manufacturing. And there are a lot of people, including a lot of pro-labor Democrats, who say, yes, we do need some tariffs or a tougher trade policy anyway, whether it involves tariffs or something else. We need some sticks with the carrots to help American manufacturing. There's actually broad consensus on that point. The problem has been the inconsistency of it and the implementation of it and the back and forth. Just imagine, Jim, if you were deciding you were going to renovate your kitchen. And on Monday, they said it would cost you $20,000. On Tuesday, they said it would cost you $40,000. On Wednesday, they said, no, it's $18,000. And the day after that, they said, no, it's $50,000. You just get dizzy, right? And so you're not going to do business with that person. You're going to try to find another market. That's what our trading partners are doing. If you're a Canadian steel producer, if you're a Canadian lumber and wood producer, if you're a Canadian dairy farmer who's had some business back and forth across the U.S. border, you're looking around now saying, can I find anybody else in a stable relationship who will buy my products? Even though for years, in some cases, decades and decades, they've sold them to us because we have the same value system. We have a shared border. It's easier. It's more cost effective. But Trump is driving them bonkers, and he's driving up their costs, and he's creating uncertainty in their business, and he's forcing CEOs to go down to the factory floor and say, Jim, Marjorie, I don't know if you're going to have a job next month because this is hurting our business. Yeah. And so they're looking for new markets. And guess what? American companies have to do the same thing because the Canadians and the Europeans. So again, I'm not smart enough to know good idea, bad idea. And I think it depends on which product we're talking about and which industry we're talking about and which trading partner or globally we're talking about. But the thing that is driving financial markets crazy and farmers crazy and steelmakers crazy and our trading partners crazy is just that it's a different story every day. They want to know what is the playing field for the next year so I can plan my business.
Talking to John King from CNN.
So last week we were talking to you, this whole Pete Hegseth and the war plans on Signal, which is not a place where you're supposed to have classified information, was all the rage. Has it gone away now? Is it over? Is it done? No heads are going to roll, it seems. At least they haven't.
At the moment, none have. Again, this is one of these issues where Mitch McConnell has said the level of naivete in this foreign policy team and how they deal with Russia and how they conduct their business. But most Republicans have just gone mute, even though privately they say some pretty amazingly scathing things about these people. They don't think they're up to the job. They don't think they have the experience level. They don't think they have the sensitivity level. They don't think they have the management skills, but they won't say that publicly. Right now. One of the reasons that Trump is hyping Liberation Day was to change the subject from Signal Gate or whatever you want to call it. They all have survived for now. There's a lot of, especially inside the Trump White House, a lot of anger at Walz, even though Walz, started and got Jeffrey Goldberg into the conversation. Hegseth is the one who actually put up what our reporting team has said. He keeps saying it was not. Our great reporters on national security at CNN, we have a fantastic team. They say it was classified information that he was posting. The Chinese can get into that, and the Russians can get into that. The Iranians can get into. Everybody can. Jeffrey Goldberg did the right thing. He didn't publish it till after the raids, and then he disclosed what happened. So I would say the temperature and the volume has been turned down publicly in the media discussion because we've moved on to other things. There's certainly, we saw this in Trump 1. We'll see if it plays out in Trump 2. If he thinks that you're hurting him, he will get rid of you. But it has caused a lot of angst in Washington. And I do think it's one of the issues that, I'm always interested in what's breaking through with the public because Trump does so many things at once. This one has broken through.
Yeah, amazing to me. I was so wrong about it. But
well, you saw so many fighter pilots and so many people in the military complaining about the double standard, and also Hegseth giving his brother a job and bringing his wife into high-level meetings. I mean, those things seem.
Here's what I would say again is whether you agree or disagree with a party's ideology or a party's policies, one of the things I always look for is intellectual consistency.
Yeah.
Because if there could be someone you disagree with, but at least you know who they are, you know what makes them tick, you know what their North Star is, so they have some predictability, right? I would just say in the case of Marco Rubio, Mike Walz, Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, go back and look. Hillary Clinton had an email server in her house. There is zero evidence that anything of this sensitivity was ever compromised when Hillary Clinton had that server in her house in Chappaqua. I'm not defending the server in Chappaqua. I think she should have had better judgment. However, every one of those people and a whole lot of other people around Donald Trump said that was unforgivable. She should go to jail and she should never hold public office again. That's what they said about her. And, and that was down here on the scale. They just did this way up here on the scale, but they're cool. They're good.
So, John, I think it didn't escape notice if people are watching you on YouTube as you speak, that you are not wearing a Red Sox shirt. They are 1-4, and you are wearing a Celtics shirt. They are favored to be repeat champions. Is that a conscious decision on your part there, John?
It was not this morning. I'm at my house. I had to move out of my house temporarily for some repairs to be done. And I'm back today, and I'm going to the office tonight to work election night. So I put my suit and tie on at the last moment. That's my philosophy in life. And so when I was dialing in for this, I looked down and I said, "Oh, Jim's going to give me hell about this."
Okay, so let's talk baseball for 30 seconds before you go. No one has ever struck out more times in the first 5 games of a season in the history of baseball than the highest paid player on the Red Sox, Devers. What do you make of that? That's enough.
It's depressing. Listen, I'm an outlier here because I know most Red Sox fans are, huge fans of the man. I don't think they handled the Devers thing well in spring training. I hope that's not what it is. But they kept saying after they signed Bregman, don't worry, he's going to play second base. He's going to play second base, and then the whole thing went crazy. Is that it, or is Rafi just still hurt? Or I don't know. I hope by when we're having this conversation in September, he's in the running for MVP, and we're in the running for a playoff spot. But it is not the beginning of the season we all expected when the ownership finally spent some money and got some players.
Yeah.
So here we go.
But look at those Celtics.
There's always next week, John.
Yeah, it's the
Hey,
best.
John,
green.
we'll
Let's
be
stay
watching
green for
you.
now.
We'll be watching you tonight on CNN with election returns. Good to see you. See you next week.
Thank
See
you,
next week.
John.
Thank you.
Thank you, John King.
We've been speaking with CNN Chief National Correspondent John King behind the reporting project All Over the Map. He does some great reporting out of Wisconsin, too, talking to people there. And the race is going on today. The election is going on today, I should say. Okay, coming up after a quick break, we cannot let this historic day go by without a few gags and guffaws. We're going to open the lines next.
Gags and guffaws?
Gags and guffaws.
Okay.
You like that? A little alliteration there?
Okay, fine.
We'll open the lines next to hear from you about your April Fool's Day stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Summer vacations are right around the corner, and if you're thinking of visiting Paris and the Louvre, here's one thing you should know.
Never go to the Louvre on an empty stomach or with a full bladder.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. A new book walks you through the best way to navigate the world's largest museum. On the next All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Safety Insurance, offering auto insurance policies designed to help for when the worst happens. You can ask an independent agent about safety insurance. Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms. And MIT Sloan Executive Education, offering short courses on critical topics led by world-class faculty. Professionals can get up to speed on AI, innovation, cybersecurity, and operational strategy. More at executive.mit.edu.
D'avril.
Oh, the French
in
thing.
French. Maddie taught us
yes,
that this
that's
morning.
Right.
That would be April Fool's Day in French, you unwashed masses. You. We have plenty of our own stories, some of which are too juicy to speak. I'm going to talk about them anyway. We wanted to open the lines to you at 877-301-8970. If you have an April Fool's experience, either you perpetrated it or were the recipient, share it with us. At what age do you finally throw in the towel and demand that the pranking stop? With me and Marjorie, the answer is never. Or are you on board well into adulthood? And what do you make of all these lame corporate PR stunts? We're going to tell you about some that pass as pranks, like face, tic-tac, whatever, that sort of thing. Pranks going wrong, pranks going right. 877-301-8970. I got to create a little bit of background here.
Uh-huh.
I think for 7 or 8 straight years, I have gotten Marjorie on April 1st. Yes,
no, maybe
that is true.
Twice.
Okay.
Maybe twice.
Okay, now 7 or 8 years I've gotten Marjorie.
Yep.
Starting yesterday.
After like 18 years of losing.
Excuse me, am I telling the story or are you telling the story?
Go ahead.
So, what am I? Oh, yes.
Yep.
So Jamie and I, that's Jamie.
That's
over right
Jamie.
there. Jamie and I, how many hours between us did we work on this? Jamie would say, our bosses would say too many. Jamie and I meet yesterday. Jamie writes up a document. We can't tell you what it's about.
Yeah.
We prepare again last night on the phone. We prepare this morning. Jamie says, I'm a little nervous. I hope I can pull this off. We have this brilliant prank that there's no way.
Brilliant prank.
And Marjorie comes in and I say, we have a meeting with our boss this afternoon, but so-and-so. She says, is that an April Fool's joke? I said, no. She sits down. Jamie comes out on cue to do this thing, and Marjorie, in the most pathetic fashion, unlike our preparation, not only plays a prank on us, and before we have a chance to react, says, April Fools, but it's the exact same prank in abbreviated form that we were going to play on her.
That's right.
So far
Poor
today
Jamie.
has been a disaster.
It's been a disaster.
On the April 1st.
Yeah, it's too bad we can't give the details, but we can't give the details.
But let me tell you, there are, just to get you in the mood, let me tell you some of the classics. One of the classics happened in 1996 when the Taco Bell Corporation said they had bought the Liberty Bell in my hometown of Philadelphia, and they were going to rename it the Taco Liberty Bell.
That's right.
That was the 90s. Another good one. Burger King announced that this is April 1st, 1998, that they had introduced for the first time a what?
The left-handed Whopper.
Exactly, for left-handed eaters.
I would have gone to buy it.
And my favorite is NPR in April 1st of 1992 on Talk of the Nation revealed that Richard Nixon, in a surprise move, was running again for president. His campaign slogan was, I didn't do anything wrong, and I won't do it again. So those are some examples.
That was great.
And by the way, when you're thinking of War of the Worlds, it didn't happen on April 1st.
No,
it happened in
didn't.
October. We'll play that for you in a minute anyway
But hold
with
on.
Orson Welles.
The other one, too, is the Boston volcano, April 1st, 1980.
Where?
WNAC-TV in Boston.
Where?
Aired a bulletin saying Great Blue Hill.
What is named after Great Blue Hills?
We are.
GBH.
That's GBH,
Is
that's
that
right.
incredible?
Because what do you call it? The receiver, whatever it is,
Whatever
is up
it
on
is,
top
yeah.
of that hill. Anyway, saying that Great Transmitter, thank you, John.
Whatever it
the
is.
Great Blue Hill in Milton had become a volcanic. Local police got all these calls asking if they needed to evacuate, and the producer of the segment was fired for failure to exercise good news judgment, Jim, and for using stock footage without labeling clearly. There was almost a stampede in Milton and Canton over Great Blue Hills becoming a volcano, but people survived. Listen to this text. We got a good one from West Roxbury. My husband does an April Fool's prank to our family every year. Last night, he stretched saran wrap across all the kids' doors.
Oh, I love this.
The reactions were
this.
exactly age appropriate. My 11-year-old rolled her eyes. My 8-year-old was delighted, and my 4-year-old cried.
Oh, that's like the perfect outcome.
Isn't that great? At least he knows not to mess with me, she said.
877-301-8970. Again, to put it in context, I think it's now 15 or 16 years in a row, I have gotten Marjorie on April 1st. So I have a decent amount of expertise in this area. And then Marjorie had that little pathetic attempt this morning.
Listen to this.
What's
I'm
that?
completely, where's one that says, Sharon from Waltham. This whole year feels like a bad joke. Why should today be any different?
Linda in Oxford, you're first on Boston Public Radio on April Fool's Day. Hey.
Hi, how are you guys? By the way, I love that I can watch you two on YouTube now.
That's very nice. Thank you.
We are.
Marjorie's waving
I'm
at
waving.
you.
Oh, I'm waving.
Thank you. We see you. Go ahead.
Anyway, I don't want to say how many decades ago, but when I was young and married, I planned this out for like a week or two ahead, and I told my husband at the time, we have to go to the mall on such and such a day, which was April Fool's Day.
Mm-hmm.
So we go to the mall and we look at the directory, and I point out the baby store, and I said, that's where we're going. And he looked at me.
That's pretty good.
And all he did is hug me.
That's a good one.
I thought he was going to go to pieces, and he just hugged me, and oh my God, did I cry. I felt terrible.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. Linda, thank you for
That is a good one.
calling. I wonder what they named the kid. Linda, thank you very much for your call. 877-301-8970. Can we play the most famous one, which isn't even an April Fool's thing? Everybody thinks the War of the Worlds thing was April
I thought so,
Fool's.
too.
It was not. And for the, 3 people listening who were alive at the time, this is 1938, and the brilliant Orson Welles, the radio broadcast was the War of the Worlds. Listen to what it was.
Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the bars, the gas tanks for the automobiles spreading everywhere. Coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity.
I didn't set that up well. We were invaded from outer space. Isn't that what it was?
That's
invaded
right.
from another. They are taking over the world. And apparently, I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, people had heart attacks. Some people died who were listening to the broadcast. Remember, this is pre-TV, and everybody was tuned to their radio, and this was relatively popular. So there you have it. 877-301-8970.
You know, there's another story that talks about how companies and big brands pull pranks, but they really want, do you buy their product?
Yeah.
But there were still a couple of ones they mentioned from last year that were huge product-wise.
What's that?
7-Eleven's hot dog flavored water.
Never heard that
Remember
one.
that?
I'd be
that was an
drinking
April Fool's joke. And then they also had something. This isn't a product, but it's pretty wild. Apparently last year, a big thing that fooled people was the baby translator.
No, I didn't hear that. Look at Marjorie. Marjorie's so happy.
The baby's going to go goo goo gaga ba 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 ba. And so he's going to say what the baby was saying. I thought that was pretty funny.
You're left-handed. Did you ever try the left-handed Whopper or
no,
not?
but I would go buy it. I would go buy it because left-handed people get excited about things. I remember
it's round though, right?
I know it's round. I know it's round. I know it's kind of a joke, but I go buy it anyway. Because I remember going to college. I think it was in college where you went to the auditorium and they actually had the left-handed half seats, to write your stuff. Yeah, because otherwise you have to sit sideways all the time when you like this or like
Like
this
what
or
again?
something.
Do it again. I didn't see it.
You had to be sideways.
No, let me see what you were doing there.
If the left-handed thing was here, so you could look straight ahead of the teacher,
left-hand
but
thing,
without it, you had to sit sideways. And so
Yeah.
left-handed people are discriminated
Okay.
against, Jim. We're only 10% of us, you know.
I know that.
But you know what?
I know a lot of important people.
A lot
Barack
of important
Obama.
people, that's right.
George W. or no? Is
No,
George W-
not W. Not
HW?
W. I think his father.
HW.
John McCain, left-handed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of great,
That's thrilling.
brilliant people like
Okay.
Michelangelo and Leonardo.
He was left-handed?
I don't know. I made it up.
Okay. Pam in Newbury, you're next on April Fool's edition of Boston Public Radio. Hi, Pam. Hi, Pam.
Hello. Happy April Fool's.
And you too.
How about exploding maple trees? NPR, all things considered.
Did they say that?
Wait, what was that again?
Exploding maple trees?
Are you getting feedback from me?
No, you're getting it from us, but we can't. It's hopeless. So,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
2005, on all things considered.
It was?
New England suffers maple woes. They did a whole expose about the problem of exploding maple trees.
Jim.
That wasn't real?
That's enough.
Okay, Pam, we got it. Check it out.
We weren't working here then, Jim.
I guess
You must
not.
have missed it.
Well, we
Listen
weren't
to this
working here in
one.
1938 during
No.
War of the Worlds either. Pam, thanks for the call.
This is just Sean in the car.
What do you say?
Many years ago, I unscrewed the shower head in my college dorm and put bouillon cubes inside of them. Listening to the residents there, realizing they were being sprayed with chicken soup was pretty good. That's a good one.
Okay, so here is the one the woman who just called was talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie. It was 2005. NPR's All Things Considered, a downturn in the maple syrup market is having harmful side effects for trees in northern New England. For the first time in decades, the maples are remaining untapped with sometimes dangerous results. Untapped and thus they exploded. Was that the theory? That's actually relatively humorous.
Listen to this one.
Yeah.
We just moved to Boston. I realized my daughter's first dentist appointment was on April Fool's Day. I called in advance and asked the dentist to pretend she needed to have 5 teeth pulled.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because the dentist back in New Mexico had screwed up. The dentist should have won an Emmy. We have video. It's hysterical. On the downside, my child will need therapy. But it
For
might have
life.
been worth it.
Exactly. Let's go to Jesse in Cambridge. Welcome to the show. Hi, Jesse.
Hi.
Hi.
Enjoying your show as always.
Thanks.
April Fool's involves a certain amount of lying. So I thought it would be funny to tell my girlfriend once upon a time that I'd been previously married, which she bought. And then my alleged wife's name was Joni Jonarino.
Mm-hmm.
Jonarino?
I think she came out of a J.D. Salinger novel, but I kept upping the lies to see when she would not believe me. So I finally had to confess that it was all in fun. Well, she didn't think it was in fun, and she didn't talk to me for about 3 months after that.
But it was worth it, right, Jesse?
No.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Okay.
Jesse,
I'm just a liar.
What's that?
I'm just a liar. I'm not that clever.
Well, I wouldn't be that unkind to yourself. Jesse, thank you very much for the call. 877-301-8970.
My name is Kate, live in Quincy. Called in the tail end of the COVID when you were asking about Zoom weddings, to which I'm opposed. Here's the prank. My husband and I, in our 40s, eloped to Costa Rica when it was still nearly vacant of tourists and got married in Spanish, a language you don't speak, on April 1st. I also dislocated my ankle that morning, and no one believed us.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Could you write us again and tell us exactly what the prank was?
I don't get it. Okay. I'm sorry. I should have read the whole thing.
Why don't you
through.
read it again?
No. I should have read the whole thing through.
I don't think so.
Okay. Let's go to Tina in the car. Hi, Tina.
Okay. Maybe that was the wrong day for the thing here. Hi, Tina. What's your deal?
Hi.
Hi.
Long time, many time caller.
Thank you.
Also left-hander.
Oh.
So once when my 3 children were very little, I picked them up from school and told them that we had to do some terribly long, boring chore after school, some errands, and they were all very disappointed because it was a beautiful day. And then about halfway there, I pretended that my car was not in my control, and I kept saying, oh my gosh, I wanted to turn right, but we're going left. Why is it going straight? It's not listening to me. And they were getting increasingly concerned, like, Mommy, why is the car not working? And I said, oh, wait, where's it taking us? I have no idea. And then we ended up at Sunshine Creamery where we had ice cream.
Oh, that's a great one. That's a beautiful story with a lovely ending. Tina, thank you very much for the call. What are you laughing about?
Here's a good one. In April 2020, the pandemic, my husband and I told our kids in elementary school that they had missed so much school they were going to have to repeat the grade.
That is horrible.
And the kids went crazy. Yeah, I thought that was pretty.
That
was pretty good. Okay, during the pandemic, our boss placed a note in the bathroom and said we were allowed to use only 2 little squares per person per visit in the bathroom because
that was Sheryl Crow,
the pandemic. Right? Yeah, she said one square. That was ridiculous.
Was she kidding? I can't remember.
I don't know.
Maybe she has a small behind. I don't know. 877-301-8970. Let's go to Mike in Newport and see what he's got on April 1st. Hi there.
Hi there. First time, long time.
Love that.
I taught middle school for about 29 years. And, back in the day when flip phones were popular, I came up with this idea on April Fool's to give a broken phone to one of my students. He was kind of a troublemaker, but he was a good kid.
Mm-hmm.
And we arranged this thing ahead of time that I would walk around the classroom and see the phone on his lap and confiscate the phone. So I would take the plan was I'd take the phone from him and I would throw him out of the classroom, send him to the dean, and then he would come back 30 seconds later and say, I got something to say to you, April Fool's. So I'm walking around the classroom. I see the phone. I say, give me the phone. He gives me the phone. I go into the speech about how I'm sick and tired of kids with phones in classrooms. I take the flip phone. I break it in half and throw it in the garbage can. I throw the kid out of the class. I go, get out of here. Go to the dean. I don't want to see you in here. Get out. He walks out of the classroom. The kids are stunned. He goes out of the classroom. 30 seconds later, as we rehearsed it, he comes back in the classroom. He says, hey, Mr. B, I just got one thing to say to you. And I yell back at him. I go, what is it? I want you to go to the dean. He goes, April Fool's. The look on the kids' faces, the jaws just hit the desk. And even after it, even like a minute after it, there were half the kids in the classroom still couldn't understand what happened. It was hilarious.
How many years ago was this?
Well, it was flip phone, so I don't know. I mean, you got to do the math. It was probably, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago or something like that.
Excellent memory, excellent planning. Sort of like the planning I did that fell apart this morning with Jamie.
Yeah.
Mike, thanks for your first call. Call us again soon. We appreciate it.
This person sent their kid to the paint store to buy a can of striped paint.
That's actually fairly funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm looking.
Okay, so we actually have a good one here. Mm-hmm. This, they say, is real, our colleagues. This is from an NPR underwriting spot played on April 1st, 2007. Here it is.
Support for NPR comes from the Soylent Corporation, manufacturing protein-rich food products in a variety of colors. Soylent Green is people.
That is excellent. That's actually pretty good.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one.
You ever heard that?
No, I never heard that one. Here's one who says, I tap down the handle on the dish sprayer so when the sink is turned on, instead of water coming out of the faucet, the user gets soaked. The person would be very happy about that.
I have to say, the bouillon cubes is really an extraordinary one.
You know, I remember when I was a kid, you know, my mother woke us up and said, the cellar's flooded, the cellar's flooded.
Oh, you said your mother did this.
And we came flying out of bed. You know, we're on the second floor. The cellar being flooded was not exactly, you know, it was bad, but it wasn't going to, we acted like the house was on fire. We got dressed, we raced out of the house. And of course, the cellar wasn't flooded, but why did we fall for that?
Well, not only did you fall for it, from what you've told me, is you became so enamored of April Fool's. Didn't you do it with your 3 kids for like decades?
Yeah, but I retired. I announced them a couple of years ago that I was retiring from my April Fool's pranks. It gets to be very stressful. You know, what are you going to...
I know, you're worried it's not going to work.
Yeah,
you got to
figure it out in advance and all that kind of thing.
Are you, by the way, it's clear that you're troubled by that. How many years in a row have you not gotten me on April 1st? Like a dozen.
Last year you got, no, it wasn't a dozen.
What are you talking
like 2
about?
years.
It's like a dozen.
No, it's not a dozen. It was like
gotten,
last year, maybe
Jamie,
the year
how many
before.
years in a row have I gotten Marjorie?
He doesn't know. He doesn't know.
Yes, he does. Did you say 8? He said 8. I'd say 8 or 9.
No, and I would get you with these stupid things like saying, Jim, you got a big hole in your pants.
I know, yours are...
And you're looking and you're trying to find the hole.
Look at Marjorie, like a 4-year-old.
I love those.
Who finds that funny?
Well, you have a spot in the back of your shirt, just looking for the spot. I mean, stupid things, just think of the moment. And I love the fact that you really believe them over and over and over again.
I didn't believe
Roger from Stratham?
Hello, Roger.
Yeah, hey.
Hi.
From Stratham, New Hampshire.
Oh, sorry.
Whatever. Hello.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We're all listening to your show right now, so I had to share this with you.
Please.
So last year in May, I was awarded an honorary doctorate from the University of New Hampshire.
Wow.
Congratulations.
And so, well, thank you very much. And so my older daughter was over the other day, and I said, I got something to tell you. And my wife says, oh, you're going to love this. I said, I got a note from the university. They're rescinding my doctorate because of the emphasis I placed in my speech on diversity. And my daughter, who teaches at Boston, was livid.
I love
She
this.
gets out her phone. She says, I'm calling Michael right now. Michael is a reporter at the Boston Globe. I'm going to text him. And I said, hold on. Let me look. Make sure you've got this all right. And she's about to send it. And I said, you're missing 2 words at the end. She goes, what's that? I said, April Fool. And she just fell apart. She was angry. But she respected the detail.
Another proud father. Why'd you get an honorary degree?
Well, I think when you're old enough, you get start chalking up these awards.
I think you're a little humble there. Roger, thank you for the call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970. You haven't said, what's the best one you ever did? Do you have a great one to your kids? Or were they all like, you have a rip in the back of your pants?
God, I don't
That's
remember.
just so juvenile.
It is juvenile. But people fall for it, though.
They do?
Yeah, because they're believable ones. And,
Can I give you a little advice for next year? Like, unlike what you did this morning, when you do an April Fool's thing, you have to let it percolate for a second.
I didn't let it percolate.
Do you know, you said the thing that was supposed to cause us to be frantic, and before you even got the words out, you said April Fool. It sort of undercuts the whole point.
Yeah.
Were you nervous? Is that what the problem was?
The two of you have been talking about it for 4 hours, so it must have had an impact.
Well,
That's all I would say.
here's the problem. Jamie makes another good point. Is when you were trying to prank us, you were giggling while you were saying the thing that we were supposed to. That's sort of a giveaway. Do you understand this?
Yeah, it is sort of a giveaway. That is true.
Yeah.
I forgot to really remember. One of the people might remember.
What?
Before we get to Jared.
Spaghetti tree?
April 1st, 1998, radio DJs Opie and Anthony claimed
that was bad.
Boston Mayor Thomas Menino had been killed in a head-on collision. And because the mayor was on a plane when the rumors started, a lot of people believed the news. And Menino wrote to the Federal Communications Commission asking them to find the radio station. And though the station tried to apologize, Menino did not accept it.
That's horrible. I mean, you agree that's horrible, right? That's not.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, which was funny. Remember the BBC, we forgot about this, said they discovered the first spaghetti tree, and they showed a photograph of someone picking spaghetti off a tree. I don't know if it was in the UK or wherever it was. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hope in Rhode Island.
Hope in Rhode Island.
Thank you, Hope, for calling.
Hello, Hope.
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, today is my birthday.
No.
Happy birthday.
Yes. And I'm 90 years old.
You are
Oh, my
not.
God.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. But what I want to tell you is funny is that my mother had 6 children before I was born.
Oh, my God.
And they were all born within 1 or 2 years of each other.
Your poor mother.
And then finally she had my brother, older than me.
Sure.
And she ended up thinking, I think she went 4 years without another baby. And I think the poor soul must have found out about birth control or something. And she thought, she said, we've got a maid now. And then I, the 7th child, came out and said, April Fools, hi, Mother.
How you doing, Hope, on your 90th birthday? How you doing?
I thought she had it made, but
we got it. How you feeling on your 90th birthday? We're trying to wish you a happy birthday here. How you feeling?
Very good, very good.
You are? You sound fabulous. Happy. That's not a joke. It is April. It is your real birthday, right?
Yes, it is my birthday.
Happy birthday. You sound fabulous.
The joke is that my mother was, that I would be born on April.
We got that. Now, we're very quick here, Marjorie and I. And Hope, a happy birthday, and we hope you have many more. And we're honored you called us on your 90th birthday. Thank you very much. Yeah.
A dear friend of ours always pranked his kids on April Fool's Day. He worked in the printing business, designed and printed a glossy brochure for Chore Camp, a place where you spend your summer perfecting your cleaning and labor chore skills around the house.
That's pretty cute.
Presented the brochure to his daughters and announced that's where they were going that summer.
That's pretty good.
They did not like that.
Now, I would bet that Jared actually revels in April Fool's jokes. Am I correct, Jared? I am, right?
You are correct, yeah.
So what's your best ever? Share it with us.
Well, I can't really remember the details. Well, I kind of can remember.
Tell us.
And like you, I can't share a lot of the details.
Tell us what
But
you
it was
can.
an elaborate ruse involving a friend of mine, and he tried to pull something over on me, but it involved someone in the media.
Ooh.
And so I conscripted Emily Rooney and Susan Warnick to rain down on him, and he has vowed to this day he has never gone anywhere near a joke with me. That was the most elaborate planning that I ever had.
And how did it do? Did it do well?
Oh, he was terrified.
That's fabulous.
He thought he had destroyed lives. And I let it hang for a long time, too.
Well, that's cruel.
Oh, man,
well, it is
you
kind
are
of cruel, but
tough,
fun.
Jared.
It's fun to be deadpan.
Can I ask you a question, since you sound like you have expertise in this area? Would you agree that if you're Marjorie and trying to do an April Fool's joke, if you're laughing in the middle of the joke, it sort of undercuts the ability to...
But they sort of fell for it.
Nobody fell for it.
It sounds like you
were
a lot of
laughing
fell for
before you even said the damn thing. Nobody fell for it.
Oh, okay. I thought you fell for it.
I'm sorry. What were you saying there, Jamie?
Then why were you so
Jared?
surprised when I said April Fool's then?
Why?
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised. It's because
you thought what I was saying had really happened, and you were just fooling.
That's actually
my
not,
theory.
Well, your theory would be wrong.
Okay.
Okay. Jared, what are you doing on the show thing?
I was going to say, it sounds like you a lot fell for it. Anyway, recently we talked about the Liza Minnelli documentary, a truly terrific, absolutely true story. Well, tonight it's airing on American Masters, and Liza Minnelli is on the Culture Show today.
No!
Oh, my God.
So we get to talk to her about the documentary.
I
the director this
wait.
time.
Oh, that's going to be great.
She is fabulous. She's 78. Do you know that? Speaking of
also
the 90th...
April Fools.
Oh, Jared.
Oh, that's pathetic. Shut him down, will you, please?
We were 30 seconds away from talking about April Fools.
Do you know who we have on? Do you know who's on the show tomorrow?
Did fall for
Judy Garland is with us tomorrow. Is that incredible?
Oh my
Thank
goodness.
You. That is pathetic. He's as immature as you are.
I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker.
So did I.
I know.
Okay.
I said to the team, they said they're going to fall for it. This is so easy.
Okay.
All right. So for real, we have the director of the Museum of Fine Arts on. We're going to be starting a regular monthly conversation about art in their collection and how it speaks to the American Revolution. They have a big announcement for us.
Oh.
Joyce Kulhawick is here to talk about the latest in TV, including Adolescence, the show everybody's talking about.
Yes.
Yes. And then Amanda Shea talking about the launch of National Poetry Month.
What time? I can't listen to the whole show. What time's Liza Minnelli on?
She's right at the top of the show.
Top of the show. Okay. I'll be listening. See you later.
Okay. That was a good one, Jared. You can keep up with us 24/7 wherever our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Thanks to everybody who tuned in.
For that?
I fell for hook, line, and sinker. Thanks to people who came down to the Boston Public Library.
Thank you all for
Tomorrow
coming.
we're back here with NBC Sports Boston's Tony Casey, Harvard national security expert Juliet Kayyem, naturalist and author Cy Montgomery to calm everybody down, and Yale's Jeffrey Sonnenfeld and corporations bending their knee for Donald Trump. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conlon, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Additional support from Tamsin Vidal. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Paul. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. He put in there Paul Weiss, trying to fool me.
Oh, that's a good one. Oh, that is a good one.
It's not Paul Weiss.
FU San Diego.
They're both no longer with us. One's Paul, one's Weiss. It's a law firm, the Bend Knee Law Firm.
We know who it is. Yeah.
Okay. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Juan Jose Cadena, our host at the Newsfeed Cafe, and across the street at the Lenox Hotel.